Hey guys, it's Breck Bassinger, but you may recognize my voice as Stargirl from CW Stargirl. And as Stargirl, I always listen to Stargirl After Show. It's so much fun getting to listen to all of my different castmates' interviews, hear about DC lore, and of course all the Stargirl history. So make sure you go listen to Stargirl After Show. And yes, I know I just said Stargirl like 50 times, but seriously, go listen to it.
Hello everyone, Screenplay Archaeology host KiramidHead here. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to get some intro stuff out of the way. First things first, we are now part of the Fandom Limb Media Podcast Network, so I'm going to link their site down below. And that's why you would have just heard a promo for another podcast, because they're another one of the shows on the network. And as per usual, if you like the show and you'd like to know more, you can check out our social media pages on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and even Instagram now. The show also has a Patreon if you're willing to gift money, but you don't really need to if you don't want to. And we also have a Discord server, which you can join if you want to chat with, the group members there. So that link is going to be down below as well. So yeah, sit back, guys, and enjoy the show. All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Screenplay Archaeology Podcast. I'm your host, KiramidHead.
And I'm Chloe.
Rejoining me since last year.
I thought it was earlier this year with Planet of the Apes.
Oh, fuck. I forgot about that already.
Yeah.
I'm just so used to thinking of you as Halloween. But no, for once, it's not a Halloween script.
Well, I did also do Return of the Thing with you.
Yeah, but Return to Thing, Halloween, Planet of the Apes. But
well,
no.
This is somewhat related to Halloween, considering the source material writer.
Yeah, and it's going to go up around Halloween.
Yeah, we've been putting off this episode, folks.
Yeah, Chloe here took like 2 weeks to pick a script out.
It was 3 days, asshole.
And then I've been ludicrously slow at reading scripts lately.
And I've just been busy doing other things.
Yeah, true. So it took us a while to get this going. So this will probably be going up early November-ish. But no, tonight we're going to be talking about Quatermass, a script which is updating the old British TV and movie character to the US in the 90s. And it's written by David S. Goyer, the comic book guy.
And a horror guy as well.
Yeah, this is early David Goyer. So this is like post-demonic toys around the time of Blade, before Blade came out, but after it was written.
Yeah, this is also like just before Dark City, where apparently Alex Proyas was going to direct the script, which I can see him directing.
Yeah, it's a script I can't find any real info about anywhere. I'm just finding like offhand references from people. And the Proyas thing is, like, weird because I found, like, a forum thread somewhere where they were talking about Proyas was going to do a remake, and they mentioned, like, one plot point from it, which is in this, too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was also going to say, this is also just after Goyer himself had written the Crow City of Angels, which unfortunately got hacked to bits by the Weinsteins.
Yeah, and unfortunately I only have, like, the first or second draft of that.
We have first draft, third revisions.
Yeah, the bad one, top dollar in it. And I'm not going to give you any context for that. You're just going to have to go look it up yourself.
Judah gets reincarnated by Top Dollar, or Top Dollar gets reincarnated through Judah.
Yeah, it's weird. And Tony Todd's just alive.
Mm-hmm. It got better as it went on, though, with its rewrites, but then...
the Weinsteins happened to it.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate because it's the bits that are there that make their way into the later, what I assume is the shooting script and that final film, even or right before the final film, like the stuff I can tell that's like genuinely good is it's genuinely good. It's a shame that for a sequel that was doing so much different, got reshot into being the same.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I have no idea how it would have turned out. But yeah, we're never going to see a director's cut of that movie.
Along with Hellraiser 4 Bloodline, it's one of those cases where like at least Halloween 6 had a producer's cut all assembled.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of Hellraiser 4, there's scenes that were just never fit, so it's impossible. Mm-hmm. But no, to move on back to this one is specifically it's specifically an updated remake of Quatermass and the Pit, which was the third serial, which Hammer adapted into their third movie. And the basic plot is the same. There's a dig site. This time it's in Harlem, New York, and it gets uncovered in this version, by a train crash. And they find, the skeletons of hominids, which shouldn't be there. And it leads to the discovery of what turns out to be a spaceship, and it leads to a more intelligent than usual take on the ancient astronaut theme.
Definitely.
And so yeah, it was a character who was created by Nigel Neal, who, as we teased earlier, he was involved with Halloween very briefly. He wrote the first draft of Halloween 3, which we still haven't gotten our hands on.
I think he wrote at least 2 drafts, because I've seen a cover page saying that's a second draft.
Yeah, so yeah, he wrote at least 2 drafts, and then he took his name off it because he didn't like what Carpenter did with the rewrites.
Not Carpenter, Wallace.
I'm pretty sure I read Carpenter did a revision, and then Wallace rewrote Carpenter.
Wallace stated on the commentary track that he actually didn't care for Carpenter's rewrite, so he actually just rewrote Neil's draft.
Oh, so it must have been another Carpenter popping out a 6-pack to finish the script.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've seen in a magazine, you can find this image online of the trade poster made for Halloween 3 that's really cool, where it's this foggy background. You have this computer where on the computer in computer text it says Halloween 3, and then atop the computer is a witch's hat.
That's cool.
And next to it, when it's listing the credits, it says director Tom Lee. It says directed by Tom Lee Wallace, and then it says written by Nigel Neal. So it was in between that trade was made obviously before Neil dropped from the project.
Yeah. And the only detail I know about his drafts of the movie is because it's probably gone into in more detail in the first Taking Shape, which I haven't read because I skipped Taking Shape 2 because it's all the unproduced movies. And there's an offhand mention in there that apparently in the ending of that, Connell Cochran grows to Godzilla size.
Okay, does that explain then why Michael Myers was growing to Godzilla, growing 12 feet tall?
In Halloween 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, that, it was brought up in conjunction with that, where it's that's a weird coincidence.
Well, I know Tom Berman suggested either to Carpenter or to Wallace that when he gets zapped by the lightning, he should turn into this pure demonic monster form, and it's the idea that that's the spirit of Halloween.
That's not a bad idea.
Because Connell Cochran, it's implied. I guess it's more overt in the Neil draft, but he's basically a pagan god. In this case, it would be a trickster god.
Yeah. So that would be an interesting thing to read eventually.
Yeah, we still have to get his second draft of Creatures from the Black Lagoon. We have that first draft, and then the revision of that second draft. But you were supposed to get the second draft at one point, and then that fell through.
Yeah, it wasn't that I was supposed to get it. It was that I'm not going to go into this on the on Mike because it was a stupid thing we tried to do over at Script Drive, which we tried it didn't work. We tried it, we couldn't get enough people involved, and then when we finally had people involved, the archive was yeah, no, we've changed our policy.
It's kind of like in Of Mice and Men when they're pulling money together to get their own ranch, but then Lenny kills Curly's wife.
Yeah, I don't know who the fucking Lenny in this situation is.
But that idea of if you've ever read that book, they're optimistic about their chances of getting their own ranch.
Yeah, and then fucking Lawrence Talbot fucks it up for everybody.
Yeah.
But no, where the fuck? Yeah. His I don't have a whole lot of optimism for that other draft of Creature from the Black Lagoon because let's just say I don't think the Neil drafts really lived up to the hype.
True, but it's still history.
Yeah, it's still interesting history and history I might need. I'm not going to say
It's not
why.
the worst. It's not the worst of the unproduced remake drafts.
Oh, fuck no. It's like the second or third best.
Yeah. Well, and you were gonna say?
What the fuck was I going to say? No. There's
basically, I was gonna say I kind of like put Neil in like the camp of like one of the best like British screenwriters for science fiction and horror to ever exist.
Yeah, I've not seen close to all of his stuff, but I've seen the serial version of Quatermass and the Pit. I've seen the 3 Quatermass movies, not counting the 4th one because that wasn't really a movie, but I don't want to go into detail on that here. I've seen the movie adaptation of The Abominable Snowman, which he also wrote, and I've seen the Stone Tape, and they're all good.
Have you seen his version of The Woman in Black?
No, I've seen the Daniel Radcliffe version.
It's better than the Daniel Radcliffe version.
Oh, I'm sure it is, because it doesn't have, a bird flew by, jump scare music.
Yeah, no, like, the scares in the Nigel Neal adaptation are legitimate. Like, the jump scares are well earned in that movie.
Oh, so it's like The Conjuring versus The Conjuring 2.
Yeah, I would love to read the teleplay for that, or the screenplay for that. Obviously, I don't think we're ever going to get it, but it's one of those, like, it'd be interesting to have.
I'd like to watch his version of 1984, just because apparently that stirred up so much controversy back in the day that they were like, people are writing angry letters to the BBC about it.
And the BBC was more harsh in their response to it than they are in their response to them platforming transphobia.
Oof.
Yeah. Don't think I've forgotten, bitches.
But yeah. You were in the middle of making a point.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I put Nigel Neal in, like, the same category of, like, Jimmy Sangster and Brian Clements.
Brian Clements, not counting Highlander 2.
Well, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, Brian Clements.
I've never actually seen that movie. I've only seen the trailer.
Yeah, it's, well, obviously it relates a lot to me.
Isn't that one of Hammer's We're Gonna Try and Make Ralph Bates Happen movies?
Yes, but it's really good, though.
I've heard Horror of Frankenstein is awful. I've seen Taste the Blood of Dracula, where they apparently lost faith in him 10 minutes in and went, fuck it, bring back Christopher Lee.
In that instance, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde is, like, the best one that they did with him.
I'm sorry, I keep tangenting.
Well, I'm gonna tangent even further. Martine Beswick is hot in that movie.
I mean, she was in, what fucking Bond movie was she in again? Was it Thunderball?
She's in both From Russia with Love and Thunderball.
Oh, yeah, she's in the cat fight.
Yeah, she's in the Roma camp fight. Don't say the other word. She's one of the girls in the Roma camp fight.
I've been listening to the books. I've heard much worse. I finished Goldfinger a week ago. Dear God. Tender loving care. Fucking hell, Bond.
And then in Thunderball, she plays, like, the woman who's there with Bond on the mission.
Dies?
She takes a cyanide capsule when she's kidnapped.
Yeah, that was that's like a character they added into the movie just for an extra chick to be in it.
Yeah. But no, you could talk about Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde all day, but
we could talk about Bond all day too.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that at some point.
Oh God, I don't want to read those Dalton scripts again.
I have yet to read them.
They're not that good.
I know.
I'm glad we got GoldenEye.
I am too, but we'll get to that at some point.
Someday. We gotta get back to Quatermass. So I don't know, how many of them have you seen?
I've seen the Quatermass experiment, and I'm just going off of the movies here.
Well, you can't see the serial, the first one, because they lost 4 of the 6 episodes. Because apparently BBC looked at the recordings and just went, wow, those are shit, and chucked them.
Yeah, no. In terms of the movies, I've seen the first one rather recently, a few years back, at a local cinema. They were showing it, so I've seen it on a big screen. It's been years since I've seen Quatermass 2, and I need to get the Blu-ray for that. And then, most vividly, I've seen Quatermass in the Pit, which, hey, same director as Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, Roy Ward Baker.
Ah, yeah.
And I really like that one.
Yeah, Pit's really good. I remember, it's been a while since I've seen the first 2, but I remember liking the first one, and I remember liking the second one more, which is kind of an uncommon opinion.
Well, it had more of a budget, I assume.
It had more of a budget, and from what I've understand, I've seen people actually say they think it's better than the serial, because apparently the serial has like a really goofy, stupid action ending. And apparently Quatermass's daughter is in the serial, and she's really annoying.
Oh god, like in terms of like other daughter characters or like other girl characters in scripts, like is there a character that you can describe her as annoying?
I haven't seen it, so I can't really. I
Okay.
just know that in the serial she's supposed. I was reading a comment thread from people who love old shit, and they were like, "Yeah, the movie's better because they got rid of her."
That's interesting.
But it also helps that the second one was actually written by Nigel Neal, who wasn't allowed to write the first movie because he was still under contract with BBC. So that takes us to Quatermass and the Pit, which we can avoid going into too much detail on right now because we're going to have to go into the script anyways, and that basically covers it.
Definitely. I'll just basically say it's one of my favorite Hammer films.
Yes, and having seen both the serial and the movie, they are very close together despite the movie being half the length.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most of the stuff it cuts out, it didn't really lose too much. Like, we cut out the reporter character who's barely in it anyways.
Yeah, I remember, like, they introduced her in the opening, and then, because, like, there's this establishing, like, tracking shot with her, but, like, she disappears pretty quickly.
Well, it's a male character in the serial who was in the first one and survived, and he comes back, pokes around a little bit, and then just randomly dies in the final part, and no one ever mentions it. It's like, oh yeah, recurring character. Like, you know the scene in the movie where they're in the church with the drill operator? There's just randomly a scene where one of the characters goes, there's someone in the nave, and then the door opens, and hi, it's James Fuller, reporter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, again, not much was lost from him. Like, there's some subtleties I think are lost, and I will say I think I prefer the ending of the TV version more because it kind of has more of a... It takes more time to make the point, whereas the movie just kind of fucking ends.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never seen the fourth one because I've never been able to find the full-length TV version, at least back when I went looking.
Yeah, I see, like, bits of it are uploaded to YouTube, and I just haven't had the time to crack it down.
And even Nigel Neal is like, yeah, I don't even think the idea was in it. I've seen that quote from him, so I'm like, ooh.
Ouch.
I'm like, man, you came up with the idea.
Mm-hmm.
But so that will bring us to the script. Now, there were apparently other attempts to make stuff just quickly. Apparently, Hammer was planning on doing a fourth movie, and it was going to be an original story. I think Neil was supposed to write it, but then it just didn't happen because of budget issues, I think.
When was that proposed?
That would have been, like, right after Quatermass in the Pit.
Oh, okay. I was thinking, like, because they, like, went down in the mid-70s when they were going to do Vampirella.
Yeah. It would have been, like, late 60s, because there's, like, a whole bunch of things where it's, like, it was, like, on a list with, like, 4 other things I saw, and it was, like, 2 of them came out. One of them was, Taste the Blood of Dracula, which I just thought was funny that was that one.
Mm-hmm.
But, no, going to the script, so it's just titled Quatermass. It's not Quatermass in the Pit or anything. And there had been another remake. Apparently, Dan O'Bannon had tried to do a remake of the Quatermass Experiment at some point. I think it was the 90s, and he said his ideal casting choice would have been Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really know anything about that, because this is the only script that's ever gotten out. And so it's written by David S. Goyer. And apparently, based on just a couple of random connections I've made just reading different things online, this would have been directed by Alex Proyas. And around this time, they had already been working on Dark City.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have been another fruitful collaboration, especially if Proyas maybe did a little bit of a revision on it.
Yeah.
And it's dated, July 14th, 1997, so we're full on in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're just going to jump right into it, I guess. It opens in New York City, East Harlem, on Lexington Avenue, where the once grand Calder building is in the process of being dismantled. And it's described as having these decorative cast iron features on it, which were a little difficult to picture.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't sound like any real building.
Then again, considering how relevant it is to the plot, maybe that's the point.
Yeah, possibly. And so down below in the subway, we watch passengers board an express train. And the train that's driven by motorman Ernest Castleman gets underway. And Castleman sees something standing on the tracks, and lights reveal it to be a demonic bat-winged figure that lunges straight at the train. He hits the emergency brakes, causing the train to derail and trigger a massive explosion, which bursts up through the ground and into the Calder building, and tears up the intersection nearby.
Die Hard with a Vengeance reference.
Yeah, it is kind of like that.
That and the opening, even, of just, like, seeing Manhattan and then some chaos happening.
And it is in Harlem. I mean, we don't get John McClane walking down the street with the sandwich sign.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is already... Oh, wait, I'll actually keep reading. Emergency services are soon on the scene, moving bodies. Most are dead. Some are alive out of the smoking crater that is the intersection of Lexington Avenue near where the train derailed. It's a little contradictory in the way it's described, because there's some places where the crater is inside the building, and there's sometimes it's described as being outside.
I think it works better inside, considering where the plot goes.
Yeah. And so an EMS team works their way through the train to the motorman's cabin, where they find Castleman alive somehow. But because the way they describe the explosion, it's like this huge fucking fireball that consumes everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like alive but unconscious and partly buried in dirt and rubble, and as they approach, Castleman freaks out and starts shrieking, and his sudden movements cause the rubble to shift, revealing a skull embedded in the earth nearby, which falls to the ground before one of the EMS techs picks it up and gives it a look.
And then it takes us into an opening credit sequence, which could be reminiscent of how the movie opens with that skull.
Yeah.
And so you could have done a nice, like, freeze frame on the skull and then have it go into the opening credit right there.
Yeah, and that's an interesting way in which 3 different versions are different, because they all have, like, a different reason why this happens. Because, like, in the TV version, it's just a construction site digging and they find the skull. And then in the movie, it's a subway station. And then in this, it's a fucking crash.
Mm-hmm. With the subway station.
Yep, so it's all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so after cutting to the opening credits, we go to Hadar, Ethiopia, where paleoanthropologist, pardon me, I got a message, Catherine Roney is digging up fossils, and she watches as a bush plane lands, and from it emerges Captain Potter. And after a brief confrontation with the locals that Roney diffuses, Potter introduces himself as a member of the Office of Scientific Intelligence, a black-budget Washington think tank that they don't ever bring up again. He tells Roney about the fossils uncovered by the derailment. They belong to about 5 or 6 early hominids, which shouldn't be in North America at all, and date to 5 million years old, which is about 1 million years older than Australopithecus, the earliest known species. So we got a couple changes here. We've gender-flipped Roney and basically combined him with his assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And Potter is restored, kind of, to the bigger role he had in the TV version. Whereas in the movie, he just kind of gets written out, and he gets, like, bitch slapped literally across the room and then just disappears from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and Potter assures Rhodey that the dating has been handled by the right people and confirmed, which annoys her, as, in her words, it makes her own work in Ethiopia irrelevant, which it wouldn't.
Yeah, it's just simply filling in the gaps.
And as Potter says, this has overturned everything we knew about human evolution. The scene shifts back to East Harlem as the two of them are escorted to the site in a black Cadillac through the crowd of onlookers, press, and religious nuts that have piled up in the area. And Potter says that the latter in particular are out in droves, as one, called the Prophet, slams his face into the window and rambles about the devil before 3 cops pull him away. And Potter compares this to the uproar about the upcoming millennium, which dates this thing immediately.
Definitely. This is actually kind of reminded me of an episode of the show Millennium, where it actually takes place in New York City and involves, like, Native Americans and stuff being dug up.
I don't know if I've seen that episode, but yeah.
It's got Amy Steele in it from Friday the 13th Part 2. And
oh, that's cool. Day. That's cool.
Yeah.
Also,
I was gonna say, it's when the show was like reinventing its own formula in the second season.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I've seen all of the second season. I think I've seen like a season and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, this actually, and as we can see, this is getting into the theme of, like, the crazy mob mentality thing that happens in both of the original versions, but gets to it a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Like, it's a running theme throughout the script in this version.
Definitely.
And so Potter leads Rhodey into the Calder building, where the explosion ripped through the roof of the tunnel, opening a huge pit where the floor was. And so they meet with Colonel Akins, who never shows up again after this scene, with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who explains that the cast iron elements of the facade were being taken down to sell off to a Japanese buyer, and leads Potter and Roney to a hydraulic lift which lowers them down into the subway tunnel. And Roney notes that the site is oddly full of soldiers for a paleontological day. Like, it literally describes them being all over the place.
Yeah. And then when the next character Breen is introduced, you could have just replaced Atkins' lines of green.
Yeah, it wouldn't have made a difference. Yeah, replace him and have him be played by Tom Atkins.
Mm-hmm.
They arrive on the station platform, which has been turned into a temporary field lab with a large number of government workers handling the finds. And Potter shows Rodney a table with the unearthed bones on it, and she points out they look all wrong, including the fact that the brain cases are much bigger than the specimens found in Africa. And that's when U.S. Air Force Colonel James Breen enters, as introduced by Potter as the Director of Reclamations for U.S. Space. And he leads Rhodey to a tented-off section of the tunnel that he warns her is deeply classified. And inside the tenting, in an area so cold Rhodey's breath is showing, is a dugout cavity with not only more skeletons sticking out of the walls, but also a 10-foot patch of curved metallic material. And Potter warns Rhodey not to touch it without gloves, as it is extremely cold, and that the first person to touch it came down with a form of frostbite. That is a throwaway thing in both versions that is very much expanded on here. Just the idea of the cold.
Yeah, I'm glad that the script plays with that element.
Yeah, and so Potter and Breen explain that through using ground-penetrating radar, they've determined that the object is perfectly spherical and 2,000 meters in diameter, so it's completely differently designed than either of the other versions.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of Art Deco-ish one in the movie and the one in the serial that looks like a giant vibrator. They've also determined that the material it's made from doesn't correspond to anything on the periodic table, so it's made from the same thing as a Predator spear tip.
Mm-hmm.
Funny joke for those of you who have seen Predator 2. For everyone else, what the fuck are you talking about?
And Predator 2 is awesome.
Yes, it's the second best one. I said it. But when told that the surface structure has crystalline features with 7-sided something or other, like it's
a surface structure, yeah.
Yeah, it's some kind of 7-sided symmetry, and it must be that sort. It doesn't exist in nature, so it must be artificial. And just by looking at the sediment layers around the object, she can determine that it could be older than the skeletons, and realizes that they don't think it came from Earth. Potter compares this to what the old man, in quotation marks, said about something called the Bloodstone, and Breen replies that they have to find Quatermass.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where things get a little bit different. When Rhodey asks what they're talking about, Potter fills her in, and so Quatermass in this version has a backstory where he was the head of NASA's exobiology program, but he was scapegoated over a disastrous Mars mission that claimed the life of his wife and was forced out. And then he later turned up on the lecture circuit with an artifact in Denmark which called the Bloodstone. And he claimed it was extraterrestrial in origin and could prove it, but was laughed out of Washington. But it has some similarities to what they're now studying, so they need him back. All this backstory is new, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, quick note about this whole element of the ancient aliens thing. So what I think makes Nigel Neal so good is. So the thing, we have to know that in real life, whenever people talk about ancient civilizations being built with, the help of aliens, it's embedded in racism, in the sense that, Egypt, they must not have been, because, we never say that, aliens helped build Greece or Rome. It's always in South America or Africa or, but I think, what makes, Nigel Neal a good writer is he takes what can be considered schlock and also problematic, but is actually able to make it compelling.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that it's actually a very, very early version of it, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because it didn't really explode until even after the movie came out. In fact, isn't there, certain evidence to suggest that, it was actually, it's entirely just, there's, a couple French writers who just ripped the entire idea off from H.P. Lovecraft?
And it could be the case, yeah.
Yeah, I believe H.P. Lovecraft, At the Mountains of Madness, is the earliest idea of that, ever.
Yeah, and obviously Lovecraft himself was problematic, but he was never positing it as real.
Oh, he would be the first person to say it's bullshit.
Well, yeah, and but we're gonna obviously get into here how rather than these aliens influencing just simply Egypt or any of those other places that those racist theories sort of suggest. This one's here going into, paganism and Celtic lore. So I think it helps sidestep that whole problematic issue, suggesting that, no, it's all of humanity that this race would, be forging.
Yes, that is true.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. That's exactly what's being said here.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, no, it's just, that's, I just want to make that note about the Quatermass series, is that it's far better than any other of the other problematic or schlock shit that's been written with the same subject matter.
Ridley Scott.
Yeah, I'll defend Prometheus.
I'll defend Prometheus, yeah.
But yeah.
But when you have Ridley Scott in interviews defending it as like a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
But also, it's worth noting that Breen here, because it is characterized a bit differently, because he remains completely skeptical in the original of any kind of alien influence at all. Mm-hmm. And they've kind of written that out, and I feel like that's smart, because what they do in the original versions is too dependent on the time frame.
Yeah.
Of when it came out. Well, okay, so we then go to the San Juan Islands, north of Puget Sound, where we are introduced to Bernard Quatermass in a kayak, and it's either Bernard or Bernard, because they don't actually specify if he's English in this version. I guess just to have an out, like just have an out in case they cast an American.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't be the first time.
Well, I was gonna say, and this Quatermass is written very differently from how he is in any other portrayal that I've read.
He's even more aggressive than the Brian Donlevy version, which is fucking saying something.
Yeah, well, and this guy is also, from the sense that I get from reading this script, because they describe him here with a salt and pepper beard, and he's still a square-built man. I'm just thinking, okay, so this is a Silver Fox version of Quatermass. This is the daddy Quatermass.
And so he's in a kayak with his dog, Claw. Yeah, he just has a dog that he just dumps for, like, the rest of this movie.
Until the end, yeah.
Yeah, and he uses a hydrophone to listen to sounds made by porpoises, and one of them, like, squirts him with his blowhole, and he's like, oh, you.
Who do you think could have played Quatermass in this script if they had made it?
That's tough to say. If it had been, like, 10 years earlier, George C. Scott.
Yeah, I can see that. If you were to go with a less, like, physical specimen version of the character, and make him British, Brian Cox.
Oh, yeah, sure. Even back then. Maybe.
Yeah, but if you wanted him to have, if you just wanted that, like, same sort of portrayal that he is in the, series, and that, that he's, like, physically, like, an older man and not in, like, peak shape, Brian Dennehy, if you wanted to have him be American.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I just saw the George C. Scott because of the fucking dolphins in this scene. Fucking hell. But no, so he rows back to his cabin in Roche Harbor, which is full of tanks with different kinds of cephalopods inside them. This is a very weird scene. Mm-hmm. So this basically turns into the scene from every, like, 80s action movie where they go to try and recruit the hero.
I was thinking of Commando.
I was thinking of Commando. I was thinking of the fucking Inception episodes of South Park, where they recruit Freddy Krueger. What about that time you told me to kill those teenagers to stop the Reds, huh?
Yeah. A little cliche, and also because by the end of the scene, when they say 5 million years old, when they bring up, like, the find, that kind of then makes the scene a little redundant to Catherine Roney and Potter's introduction.
Yeah.
Because you're restating something that, like, you've already told the audience. So maybe that's first scene with Captain Potter, and Roney, could have been omitted and just rework a little bit of the dialogue to reintroduce them, but not restate the same stuff.
Yeah. I mean, this is David Goyer. This is the guy who wrote in 2 separate scenes in Man of Steel where they explained what the S means.
Yeah, but, like, that made it into the final fucking movie.
Yeah. And
that's not just David Goyer's fault. That's, like, Zack Snyder for not catching it, and then that on the editor for not catching that.
And it's also the movie where they spend, 30 minutes on Krypton at the beginning, and then 30 minutes after that, they summarize it again.
Yeah, well, then not only that, but also, who does, instead of going to his, Superman not going to his dad for help, he just goes to the preacher one. If he had gone to his dad could have prepped him on all the information about Zod.
You said his dad, and I'm like, no, this is after the tornado scene.
No.
Okay, so yeah, Breen is waiting inside, and Quatermass is, like, immediately pissed off. And
when I read the line, been a long time, Quatermass, I think of Krauser from, Resident Evil 4.
God, that would be so funny.
Been a long time, comrade.
And then everyone playing the games is like, who the fuck is this guy?
Well, until you play Dark Side Chronicles.
I'm not playing the fucking rail shooter. But okay.
It's a good rail shooter.
But it's like, so it's like, yeah, Breen, I've been studying the neurobiology of these animals in an attempt to learn what intelligent alien life might be like. And it's actually not a bad idea. It's just the way it's presented. It's like, well, that's random.
Especially with how the scene escalates.
Oh, God, yeah. He punches
0
Breen.
to 10.
Yeah, immediately he punches Breen, forces his hand into a tank with a very poisonous octopus for a few moments before letting him go and telling him to leave. So he's
pointing a rifle at him.
Yeah, so now he's octopusing. And this is where we find out that Quatermass warned Breen that the mission wasn't ready, but he went ahead with it anyways, blackballing Quatermass when it all went wrong to protect his career. So this is easily the most villainous version of the character in any version.
Definitely.
Because
yeah, I was gonna say, now I'm getting reminded of when Jack Crawford has to recruit Will Graham to solve the Tooth Fairy murders.
Yeah, if Will Graham was as crazy as he was in the TV show. He is just weird, because Quatermass is never quite this aggressive at any other point. Like, he's never this fucking violent until, like, near the end, and that actually makes sense. Here, it's just like, okay, dude, maybe ease off on the attempted murder.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is, maybe they based this version of Quatermass off of John Milius.
And it makes me think of, like, they took the Don Levy Quatermass from the first two movies and amped it up to 11, because that's the version that, for context, SF Debris referred to his attitude as, how dare Cthulhu fuck with my rocket? And so Breen gets Quatermass to listen when he mentions that the new find could be related to the Bloodstone, only much bigger. Yeah, there's that Bloodstone that's in Silent Hill Homecoming. That's what we're talking about.
Or the James Bond video game, or the Dwight Little movie that he made right before Halloween 4.
I know, you're salty because I went to Homecoming immediately.
I don't even remember what the Bloodstone is in that game, because I've not played that game in a decade.
It's completely pointless, because it's just like, there's a bunch of different gemstones you have to put into this thing to get the rifle. And there's like, you only need 2, but there's 4 lying around, and the Bloodstone is one of the useless ones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then it goes immediately to Breen and Quatermass flying into Harlem via a Black Hawk helicopter, where the military is in the process of evacuating 20,000 residents with a cover story that a sarin gas bomb has been planted in the subway, and any access to the tunnels is being sealed off. So someone's been watching the news.
Well, I was going to say, this is updating the idea of, that's at least in like the movie, and I assume it's in the serial too, because in the UK you have the air raids of World War II, so there could have potentially have been bombs that had not been detonated on UK soil that were, Nazi bombs or missiles.
Yes, that is in the serial, and the way they introduce that idea is really funny, because Roni's assistant, she sticks her finger in the ground and says, oh, it curves down. Maybe it's an unexploded bomb, and all the workers on the site freak out, and Roni, who, by the way, is played by Felix Leiter from Goldfinger, is like, don't fucking say that, basically.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like, so this is funny, also funny when this was written. Goyer compares this to, like, being even worse than the Oklahoma City bombings. And like, oh, this is New York. I mean, I guess the World Trade Center attack of 93 wasn't even all that bad compared to the Oklahoma City bombing. I don't know, but like the Oklahoma City bombing was like the most recent terrorist attack that had been committed on American soil, to the point when the script was written.
That they use it as a comparison.
Yeah.
As they get out of the helicopter and begin to be escorted to the Calder building by the National Guard, they are fired upon by a sniper who hits one of the guardsmen, and Quatermass drags him to safety, and is informed by a policewoman that the local gang is convinced that the evacuation is phony and wants to start a race war. And the guard and the police shoot down the sniper, and Breen and Quatermass continue on their way. So yeah, things have already escalated.
Yeah. I don't know if they should have saved that for later, but it does tell you that shit's already hitting the fan.
I do kind of like how it even escalates even further from here. Like, it's
already starting off bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because,
okay, yeah, then I'll defend it.
Because this version establishes that the effects are further reaching and have kind of always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it's much more subdued in the originals. But
yeah, because this area is already a drug den, essentially.
Yeah, there's even a scene where they point out all the fucking crack vials.
Mm-hmm.
And so they make it down to the subway tunnel, where Quatermass notices his watch is going haywire, and the station area with the hull is now much colder. And the workers, who are now needing Arctic suits, have now dug out a 100-foot section of it, which is now covered in frost, as well as faded from black to dark gray. And
I guess you could compare that to the octopus turning color as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's a subtle nod, that the idea that it's already starting to get worse.
Yeah, the idea that that's more subtle than I'm used to from Goyer.
Mm-hmm.
And so Quatermass gets introduced to Potter and Roni, and when the latter says she has no idea how the skeletons got there, Quatermass theorizes that they arrived on board the spaceship, as he is now calling it. And so when Potter informs him that the ship is not generating any background radiation, but rather causes the temperature to drop and the electronics to malfunction, which Quatermass tests by shining his flashlight at it, which sounds like a really cool effect where, like, the beam just starts cutting out as it gets closer to the ship. Quatermass states that it must be absorbing radiant energy, saying that he studied the effects before. And then he opens the metal case, and I was expecting a rock. It's a fucking sword. It's a sword with a blade made of meteoritic iron and a stone in the hilt that appears to be the same material as the hull.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something where they could have filled in the gaps a little better on in this, and maybe a revision.
Yeah.
And so Quatermass starts to relate legends about the Bloodstone bestowing visions, having fallen from heaven, etc. Would you say that the game Bloodstone fell from heaven?
I don't know.
And so Breen interrupts and instead asks for facts. And then Quatermass does another crazy fucking thing. He points the sword directly at Breen and rattles off some facts. The
way that this is written, when he goes, fact, blah, 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 blah. It was reminding me of when Channel Awesome was trying to refutate all of their claim, sexual assault allegations. Fact.
And then that was a document where they censored male porn and fucked themselves up even more, right?
Yes. In their response, yes.
Oh my god. And so,
fuck you, Juaria. Fuck all of you guys.
Yeah. And so the facts are, it maintains a consistent temperature 5 degrees below its environment, and that attempts
your testicles.
Yeah. What? Oh, never mind.
Your testicles are a few degrees colder than the rest of your body.
Okay.
I got that shit from Mansers back in the day, dude.
Okay, so attempts to determine its composition have failed, but determined it's crystalline, the exact same 7-sided symmetry present in the hull. And Breen nods, pushes the sword away, and fucks off to go talk to the foreman of the excavation.
I was going to say, this is the second time that Quatermass has threatened Breen.
And Breen takes it very well every time. When he tried to kill him with the fucking poisonous octopus from Michael Crichton's State of Fear. And so Roni, she's like, you don't like this guy, do you, Quatermass? And he's like, oh, you're the worst kind of career militarist. Cold as a corpse, half as charming. And she goes like, well, that's a good thing, because she likes digging up dead people.
By the way, this is their meet cute.
Yes, this is. Yes, she's a love interest.
And she sees this unhinged man and is already moist.
I will admit, the joke about maybe being cold as a corpse isn't bad. It's actually for a paleontologist.
Mm-hmm.
And so they learn each other's first names. And I think they just call each other by their last names throughout the rest of the thing anyways.
Yeah, maybe, considering, I think it should be a case of everyone else refers to Quatermass as Quatermass, and then Catherine, if you're going to do the love interest thing, then have it be a little more personable, so have her call it in Bernard.
Well, I mean, if my last name was Quatermass, I'd understand why everyone wanted to call me that.
True.
And so, and then he's like, well, Breen is the Antichrist, and you just need to accept that. And I'm like, okay, Donnie Darko. It's a weird fucking choice of words he had there.
Yeah.
And so Roni then touches the Bloodstone and gets a quick vision of a red-skied world on fire with things flying through the air and a spectral presence looming over it. And this image, this vision, it's in different places, but it's in all 3 versions. The color of the sky is different in all 3 versions.
Mm-hmm.
It's purple in the TV version. It's like a dark brown, I think they say in the movie, and in this it's red.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was weird that, like, Nigel Neal was like, yeah, I'm going to pencil in a different color. Even though the dialogue is, like, really close.
Yeah.
Between the versions. I'm going to write in a different color here. And so she snaps out of it. Quatermass asks her about it, only for one of the engineers to... I capitalized engineer. I've been putting way too much alien movies into my head to call out, saying they found an opening. And so he leads them to a 10-foot wide ovoid hatchway, which goes on for 20 feet before stopping at some sort of inner bulkhead. Now, I have to point out about this. In the original serial, they actually find the hatch like a few feet away, which in the movie, the thing just fucking has a hole in the side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I'm not sure why you changed that, but okay. So, two workers named Benson and West are clearing the frozen mud away from the bulkhead and stop as Quatermass and the rest enter. And so Quatermass spots a series of interlocking circles that forms what looks like a pentacle, and several more as well. It's a 5-pointed star. Now, in both versions of this, I have looked and looked at those 5 circles, and I have not seen a fucking pentacle.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot see it for the life of me. Maybe I just have terrible patterns.
Yeah.
And this is one thing that I think is a little bit better in the TV version, because in the TV version, it covers the entire hatch. Like, it looks like it's there on purpose. In the movie, it looks like they forgot about it and then scratched it back on.
Like some teenage boy discovered it and, like, was like,
yeah. And in this, it's described more like the movie version, but there's a shitload of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he says was used to ward off the devil, and speculates that early settlers could have found the ship and scratched it into the bulkhead. Now, I appreciate that Goyer's trying to, like, expand on the lore, because that never really gets, like, developed on at all in either version. But it's buried in 5-million-year-old sediment. I don't think the fucking Dutch settlers could have gotten down there.
Yeah, no way.
And again, Quatermass goes, "Hey, Potter, get me my sword." And so he holds it up to an impression in the bulkhead, and he discovers that the bloodstone fits in it. It's a perfect fit, almost like a key. And that doesn't lead to what I thought it was going to lead to. It's never explained how these Danish sword makers got a stone from the ship. Or was it from another ship?
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like you could potentially write an explanation in, maybe say that, like, oh, it fell out of the sky, and then have them speculate that maybe it was like a ship that blew up.
Yeah.
And that's why when the vibrations the ship has been giving off intensify. And West screams, diving out of the hatchway. And he says he saw some sort of figure that walked through the wall and came right at him. And this guy's in both versions, and I swear in both versions, the accent is like, in the TV version, you can't I didn't understand what he said the first time.
Like he's from, like, Northern England or something?
Something like that.
Yeah. It's like in Hot Fuzz when they're talking to the one, guy out in the country, and, they're, like, having to translate, what he's saying, like, and it becomes, like, more coherent it gets less coherent, from person to person.
It's like me watching the Red Riding Trilogy and trying to figure out what the hell Sean Harris is saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can kind of make out Andrew Garfield and Sean Bean, but so Breen dismisses it as claustrophobia and orders his men to take West out of there. And Quatermass follows, and a cop who's been posted at the top of the pit says he's not surprised the man saw something, as the building has been claimed to be haunted for years, and he's a local. He says there are all sorts of stories, noises, screaming, and even things being seen. What's really funny is that the TV version, it's like a batty old couple that, like, points them in this direction because they want to get back into their house to get some of their shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, he needs his long underwear.
Well, in the at least in the movie, it's called Hobbs End, and it's Calder Building here. Do we know the meaning of Calder?
I do not.
Is it, like, meant to be like cauldron?
I can do a quick search, see if a definition comes up. And what's interesting is that Hobbs End is actually in the movie specifically.
Mm-hmm.
In the serial, it's just Hobbs Lane, but both are in the movie.
The devil connection,
which then gets Carpenter brought over for In the Mouth of Madness.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we'll be getting to Carpenter later here in the comparisons.
Oh yeah, probably. Calder, name meaning variant of Scottish Calder.
Okay, well, that is tying it back to, like, Celtic something or other.
Boy's name, popularity over time.
Maybe this is an instance of David Goyer being too subtle.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the definition. The baby name site does not give a meaning. It's apparently in 2021 on level of popularity it was like 8,000 something. Thought to come from the Old Norse, basically meaning calf, and 2 words meaning calf and valley. So it has nothing to do with the devil.
Okay. The cop character, they should have made it the cop from earlier, Evans.
Yeah, have her come back. Because
Yeah.
I wrote her name down in the notes, but I didn't say it out loud because she's not important.
Yeah.
And so Quatermass thinks this over and goes to Potter, saying that the motorman reported something like that. And Potter says he's under observation at Metropolitan Hospital after apparently having some sort of psychotic break. After being in that crash, he should be in the hospital, period.
Yeah, I know. Like, if he were to survive, he would have burns all over.
But no, he's fine.
Physically.
Yeah, Quatermass wants to see him, so he, Potter, and Roni all head for a Black Hawk helicopter. Guys, cars are a thing. An unruly crowd is pressing against the nearby barricade, and a few of them break through and run for the helicopter. Like, what is this, the first draft of Halloween 6?
We get that reference.
Yeah, we get that reference. Mitchell Ryan is Breen. How does that sound?
That could work. Could have worked.
Here, Loomis, get in my helicopter. If you're a regular listener to this show, you know what that is. One grabs onto the skid as it takes off, and Quatermass has to help Potter shake him, make him fall 40 feet to the ground. So, Quatermass body count 1. Quatermass speculates...
Wait, this is reminding me of Life Force, when the two vampire soldiers get up on the helicopter when they're taking off.
Yeah, I believe Life Force was... I believe Quatermass in the Pit was an acknowledged influence on Life Force.
On space vampires, on its source material.
Yeah, I've never actually read the book.
Neither have I, but I know Colin Wilson hated the movie, but I love the movie.
It's a crazy movie.
I love it for that reason.
Yeah, and so yeah, Quatermass body count is at 1. I don't know if he gets. I don't remember how many more he gets.
Are we gonna Are we gonna dead meat this? You know, on average, we had to kill every 5 pages.
Oh God, no! If we did that, we would be in the thousands by the end of this thing.
There will already be people dead from the open.
Yeah. Quatermass speculates that all these people are drawn here by some kind of call, and Roni looks out the window, catching sight of the prophet from earlier, now with a pentacle carved into his chest. Like, okay, body modification. I have an ear piercing that makes me transhuman. No, it doesn't. Sorry, I came across this really stupid person in comments talking about crimes of the future, saying, I hope they don't make transhumanism sound bad, because there are real transhumanists in the world right now. And I'm like,
I mean, transhumanism, everyone's still trying to comprehend me and my transgender identity.
Trying to say that, body piercings were transhumanism. I'm like, no.
If it was connected to something else, maybe I'd be willing to grant that.
I'm like, if you have one of those, implants that helps you see, I can totally buy that. But, if your earring does not count,
No, unless it's doing something, then yeah.
And so they soon arrive at Metropolitan Hospital's Psychiatric Emergency Services ward, which appears to be overrun by patients. And they're met by a Dr. Deirdre O'Connell, it's open for debate if she's a descendant of Rick, who says they normally only get 1 or 2 walk-ins a day, but are now getting dozens due to an upsurge in schizophrenia-like symptoms. And
now this is where the Prince of Darkness comparison comes in.
Oh yeah, except I think this actually understands schizophrenia more than Prince of Darkness does.
Yeah.
And no one's staring at worms in a cup in this.
Mm-hmm.
And she also tells Quatermass that this is... No, wait, where am I at? This also only seems to be occurring in East Harlem. She leads the group to Ernest Castleman's cell, where he has been restrained due to violent behavior. And she tells Quatermass that this appears to be an isolated incident, and as far as she knows, he has no history of mental illness. And so Quatermass speaks to Castleman, asking him what happened, and he says he was in the tunnel, then in another place. He saw them coming and had to run, describing them as having wings and horns and leaping and flying about. And Roni, against O'Connell's warnings to stop, asks him where he went and what the color of the sky was, and he replies it was a blood red, and that he saw hell in the end times before breaking one of his restraints and attacking her. And so O'Connell calls in 2 orderlies who sedate and re-restrain Castle. And this is just making me think of Exorcist the beginning.
The Harlan version?
Yeah, where Father Marin has to go talk to the dude who was there before him, a mental hospital.
I have not seen that version.
I've seen some of it. The doo-ba-doo. So in the hallway, Roni confesses to Quatermass that she saw that exact scene when she touched the bloodstone. But O'Connell approaches them before Quatermass can respond. She tells them they should have stopped when she told them to. And Quatermass responds by asking about another patient she compared his delusions to, which she didn't actually, so that's a bit of a fuck up. I wrote that in my notes verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually went over the previous scenes with a fine-tooth comb just to make sure I didn't miss something.
Yeah.
And so she initially turns to Potter, who backs up Quatermass, and tells him about Richard Boone, who has dealt in similar imagery to what Castleman has described. And so O'Connell takes them to Boone's isolation cell, saying that they've made breakthroughs with finger painting, and in fact, he's painting horned winged demons on his cell walls that very moment. And
with his turd? With his own turds?
No, the turds are later. He's using blue paint.
Okay.
The turds are later, and they're not specifically him doing it. No, he's not using the Marquis de Sade special tool. And so we find out that he was brought in after killing his entire family, and he claimed to have found a doorway to hell in the basement of his apartment building. So the Sentinel, and that the people around him had been taken over by demons.
Or Ronnie DeFeo.
Oh. Specifically in the Platinum Dunes version. And so Boone decapitated and eviscerated the babysitter's a goddamn idiot, laying out their organs in the pattern of a pentagram, which seems to have used Potter. And when pressed, O'Connell tells Quatermass that he lived in the Calder building. So we're drawing connections. And Quatermass is allowed into the cell to talk to Boone, who says that they told him he was coming in his dreams. And Quatermass starts recording this with a tape recorder, and Boone says that he hears voices from under the ground whenever he goes to bed. He says that iron hinders and some other things, and there's a bunch of rambling, basically. He basically starts talking like Etrigan, the demon. Like he's talking in like rhyming couplets. And so Boone begins to speak in tongues, and as Quatermass turns to go, Boone calls to him by name, telling him he's found the devil, and asks him if he's aware of eschatology. And so Quatermass affirms that he has, and Boone recites one of Nostradamus' prophecies to him about 1999 and the Great King of Terror. I actually read about this particular Nostradamus quatrain, and apparently it's been very poorly translated over the years, and he's not actually saying King of Terror.
Yeah.
But it fits the story so well, I kind of want to give Gloyer a pass on it.
Yeah. Just roll with it. This is also kind of reminded me of another Millennium episode from the second season.
Wow.
Just the whole, it's the Charles Nelson Riley character, Jose Chung from the X-Files episode, and it ends after his death, and it's him, like, going, here's my, prediction for the next, Millennium. This same old crap.
He was right.
Yeah.
And so he calls out to quit, and so Quatermass leaves the cell and explains to Potter that eschatology is the theological study of the end of the world. And Potter, who has not really been doing a whole lot for like the last 20 pages, is quick to dismiss this as crazy ramblings from Boone, but Quatermass isn't so sure. Boone called out to him by name, despite Quatermass never mentioning it to him. So Boone is kind of like Maria.
Yeah, or in this case, maybe they also need to talk to Quatermass, considering that he knew about Boone, or O'Connell making a reference to Boone without her actually making a reference to Boone.
Yeah, true. And so they take
maybe Quatermass here should be suspect. Well,
yep, possibly. I mean, he knew about the Bloodstone. And so they take the tape to a Dr. Hans Gehring at the Linguistics Department of Columbia University, who recognizes two different languages from when Boone was speaking in tongues. And this scene reminds me of The Exorcist.
Oh, definitely.
It's Nederlandish, which was spoken by the early Dutch settlers, and Algonquian. Yeah, it's like that scene where the guy who you find out in Exorcist 3 was apparently a black woman.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we're going to bring Doctor Who into this, Regenerated.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to have to bring Doctor Who up later. But Boone was saying something about Imson.
Yeah, we forgot to get Deus Deacon on the line.
Yeah. It would have been harder scheduling with him because he has like actual school going.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, foul noises and iron hindering that was difficult to make out. And Gehring says the languages date back to the early 17th century when Peter Minuit bought Manhattan from the natives.
That's a curious way of putting it.
Here, take this junk.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah, he told them, that he's the vice president of the company and he's only in town for one day. And Gary Glenn Ross reference for people who understood it. But Quatermass and company, because I can't be asked to write out all four people's names. And company, they then head to the special collections and find an account of Peter Minuit staving off imps and demons after felling trees in the winter of 1626. Potter wonders if Boone could have read the same account, but Quatermass finds that unlikely. He thinks that Boone and the rest were picking up signals and experiencing something real, and speculates that the ship is a recorder of some sort, with memory stored in its hull, which is what causes the hauntings and visions. He then turns to Roni and mentions her experience with the Bloodstone, which seems to start getting to Potter. And Roni has spotted another account of how in 1762, two men digging a well were accosted by apparitions, and one of them was driven mad. And they sift through more documents, and Potter comes across one more, a New York Times article dated October 17th, 1916, about how demonic sightings occurred after the groundbreaking for the subway tunnel and resulted in a massive, brutal riot. And Quatermass ties them all together as they all relate to disturbances of the Earth. And what's interesting is that these are the exact same disturbances that are used in the original, just transplanted to different times in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
It's the trees, the well, and the subway.
Yeah.
And he theorizes that the ship's psychic residue is affecting the people of Harlem, and Potter is now more convinced, saying it would explain the hostile behavior from the locals, to which Quatermass adds the influx of schizophrenics at the hospital. And then, sight unseen, a soldier arrives bearing a message from Breen, saying that they've begun work on getting the bulkhead open. Not entirely sure how he knew where to look for them, but...
Unless they called in.
Yeah, unless the helicopter pilot narked on them.
Well, considering that they're on the government's dime here, I think the government would want to know where they are at every moment.
Yeah, and so they soon arrive back at the dig site, where the ship is lightened again to a powder gray, and Quatermass angrily confronts Breen. Let's be honest, there's no other type of interaction between them. Who says he's under orders to determine the threat level of the ship and either reclaim or destroy it. And Quatermass shows them the research they've gathered and even connects the ship to the high amounts of violent crimes in the area, but Breen shrugs it off as coincidence and hysteria. Like, okay, yeah, let's explain drugs and urban blight with aliens, huh?
Yeah,
That hasn't aged super well. Like, it probably would have gotten by okay in the 90s, but...
Yeah, I know. Well, this is, during the X-Files heyday, so I can see why the script was written.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole aliens influencing me. Yeah, I can see why it makes sense why the script was written at this time, to cash in on X-Files.
Yeah, this is before people got sick of X-Files.
Before they loved it again.
Yeah.
And then they got sick of it again. And I just wanted a season 4 of Millennium!
But so Quatermass suggests expanding the evacuation area to the whole of Manhattan, but Breen just brushes him off as being afraid, which he describes as the key difference between them. Yeah, we're going to evacuate all of Manhattan, and all we're going to leave are Will Smith and a dog. And the attempt to bring
my name out your fucking mouth!
The hell you doing, Fred? Those two moments go together.
Yeah.
Have you seen the edit online where they sub in Shia LaBeouf in front of the mannequin?
No, it's not.
You know, it's really funny. It's him doing the "Just Do It" speech, and Will Smith going,
"No,
that
makes sense.
No."
That makes sense. You'll send that to me later.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. The attempt to breach the bulkhead proceeds with a drill operator named Sladden setting up a titanium carbide drill. Now, what's interesting is that Sladden is still in this, and he's a character from the originals, but his role kind of got shifted over to Boone mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Boone and Castleman. Well, mostly Boone.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the first attempt, it just glances off, but on the second, it causes a high-pitched screech and intense vibrations, which makes them all physically ill, forcing Sladden to turn it off. And that's when cables, tools, etc. start to defy gravity, a phenomenon that seems to be centered around Sladden. And the frightened drill operator runs out into the street, where the vibrations are also being felt, and items continue to float around him, work lights explode, and so on. Eventually, the vibrations stop, and the neighborhood's power, sucked in by the ship, blacks out. Back in the tunnel, Quatermass notices that the bulkhead is now opened, revealing a dark tunnel that presumably leads into the heart of the ship. That is one thing that's better in both remakes here, because in the original, the way they get the bulkhead open is that the drill doesn't work, and then suddenly there's a hole in the bulkhead that somehow melted open where they were pointing the drill, and then they stick a crowbar in it and then pry the bulkhead open.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we're about to get something interesting, and then the script does a big fuck you and cuts to a news report. And sadly, it's not the hilarious reporter from the TV version who's like, very BBC-like. Colonel Breen, does this not mean that the English spirit is unbroken? Like, that's a terrible impersonation of him.
And British, we can make fun of them.
And the French.
Yeah.
And
the Italians.
But so, the Channel 9 news report detailing the weird events going on, the blackouts, the evacuation, etc. And it introduces us like a reporter character who just randomly dies later on in the script.
Yeah.
And so it goes to a press conference. That might be my least favorite part of this, is that scene. It's like, oh, fuck you, Cutting Waves.
Yeah.
But it's a press conference at one police plaza held by Mayor Elkins, and Breen is lurking behind him, who encourages everybody to keep calm and carry on, while also stating that he's instituted a curfew as well as martial law.
Oh, thanks for the comfort.
Yeah. And so immediately after the press conference, Elkins complains to Breen about lying to his constituents, and objects when Breen says they'll be sending in the 10th Mountain Division to maintain order. However, he's interrupted by Willard Grange, special advisor to the president, who just reminds me of that guy in Apocalypse Now who's in the briefing scene, and they never say who he is. Like, it's implied he's CIA.
Well, the weird part about this character's introduction is, so throughout the script there are some circlings like around names or notes, and right next to this paragraph is an X. So I wonder what that's supposed to mean.
Maybe write him out?
Or like restructure this? I have no idea.
Change the name? Unfortunately,
Yeah,
unfortunately, it's just circles. There's no notes with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like that one Speed Racer script I have where they circle, like, the description and go, what the fuck is this movie about?
Is that the J.J. Abrams script?
No, that's the Patrick Reed Johnson.
Oh, okay.
And he's only been kept in the loop because he's useful as a PR figurehead. And we then go to the Command and Control Center, and Command and Control is something that Microsoft Word keeps fighting me on this, wanting me to hyphenate it, and it's not hyphenated in the script, so I won't do it, and I can't get rid of the blue lines. It's pissing me off. But it's in that very building, and apparently we find out later it's designed to withstand a nuke, where Quatermass fills in everyone on the current situation, summing up what the audience already knows, as well as adding new information. So, there's a zone of influence around the ship, which, according to a map on the wall, is covering most of the upper east and west sides now, and could cover all of Manhattan within 24 hours. I'm just imagining the fucking map from Spider-Man 2018. Or 2019, whatever year that game came out in.
Yeah.
And Grange asks what is actually happening, and Quatermass responds that the energy is being channeled somewhere to feed something, as it can't just disappear. And Grange also asks about the corridor behind the bulkhead, and Quatermass shows him footage from a remote probe they sent into the corridor, and mentions that the surface temperature is quite hot at 45 degrees Celsius. And the constant references to degrees in Celsius kept throwing me off, because I'm like, 45 degrees, that's not hot.
Yeah, well, we're undereducated in temperatures here, so.
Right, I kept forgetting it was supposed to be Celsius.
Yeah.
And the footage goes staticky and cuts out as the probe didn't last long. And Potter explains that the atmosphere in the ship is very similar to our own, just with higher amounts of carbon dioxide, which Roni notes would make it just like our atmosphere 5 million years ago. It's also breathable, and they point out, I don't know how scientifically true this is, that any alien germs wouldn't be able to hurt them as they evolved on a different planet.
Yeah.
So were all those people wrong to bitch about them taking off their helmets in PS? If that's true, because I know I've read that if you ate an alien, it would kill you because you can't digest it.
Yeah.
I know I've read that, but...
Well, I was going to say then that upends the entire Starfleet diet.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
And so
how many more deaths would there be in Star Trek in this instance?
Well, when you get the replicator in TNG. And so Quatermass points out something they've overlooked. If there are alien life forms on board the ship, then they had to have come here purposely, looking for a planet with a breathable atmosphere, which would point towards a colonization scenario. And the subject of the fossils comes up with a reference to Chariots of the Gods, and Breen brushes it off and says there's no way to know for sure until they go inside and look. And for the only time ever, Quatermass agrees with him. Yeah, he would probably still try and stab him over this.
Yeah. I'm just imagining, like, every scene of, like, Breen talking, and Quatermass is, like, standing behind him and holding up the sword. And then, Breen turns around, and Quatermass, like, quickly hides the sword behind his back.
And so later, Roni steps outside the conference room to get some coffee. When she spots Quatermass watching the stars from the balcony, he's trying to spot his wife's ship, which went off course and we find out they all starved to death, which, wow, and is now stuck in orbit around the sun. I'm imagining, what if they did a sequel to this, and the ship somehow came back, and Quatermass's wife was the fungus monster from Quatermass Experiment?
Ooh, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
To bring up a movie that, like, I guarantee you were not thinking I was going to bring up, there's if they wanted to, for, like, a backstory, they could have had a bit where, if you've ever seen the movie The Crawling Hand, which got riffed on the first official season of MST3K.
I don't know if I have.
There's actually a decent scene where, the astronaut in the movie whose hand is crawling later, there's a bit where he's talking to Mission Control and he's begging them to blow him up.
Oh. Okay, yeah. There's so many there's more killer hand movies than you'd think there would be.
Yeah. But that would be kind of an interesting scene, although now this is kind of like reminding me of Return of the Thing.
Yeah, a little bit.
But that could have been an interesting scene if they wanted to give her a backstory where, like, somehow Quatermass had to, like, reluctantly kill her in some instance.
Yeah, something like that. Now, it was officially attributed to pilot error, but Quatermass says their guidance system failed, and the accident could have been prevented if he had been listened to. And this is where Roni is like, okay, keep it in your pants, woman. She's like, oh, did you ever remarry?
But also, I have to ask this because this is written after the Challenger explosion.
Ooh, right.
So I don't know if that's what this is commenting on here, but when I think of Mission to Mars in this, like, era of science fiction, I'm thinking of Species 2.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Mission to Mars.
But I was just wondering, like, I don't know if that's what Goyer's commenting on, because essentially with the Challenger explosion, NASA's reputation, I don't think has ever recovered from that. Just because of the optics of it and the fact that, yeah, it was preventable. So I have no idea if that's what Goyer's commenting on or what, but yeah.
Yeah,
am I making sense of that?
Yeah, it's making sense. Yeah, and so so Roni was like, "Oh yeah, have you ever remarried?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, my wife and I, we talked about it, and she would have wanted me to, but nah, I never did." I'm like, would you really have had that conversation?
I think some couples do.
Yeah, maybe.
Especially if they're in, like, a volatile work field.
Yeah, I usually see that conversation come up when there's kids in the picture.
True.
Yeah, but it's just kind of funny the way this seems written. It's actually.
But it could be. I was gonna say it could be that Rachel was keeping Quatermass sane.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why they would have discussed it.
He would be just stabbing people all the time if it wasn't for her. He would have stabbed Breen anyways.
Yeah. I'm thinking of that scene, the ending of Blade 2. Hey, another Goyer movie, but that bit where Blade finally kills the vampire from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I heard ending of Blade 2 and my mind just went to vampire pile drivers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah. And they have
I was going to say, this is a better Constellation discussion scene than the one in the Lost in Space movie where they just bring up Looney Tunes.
Yeah, I don't remember that, actually. I'm thinking of the scene in that where fucking Joey is, like, drawing on the fucking condensation on the windshield.
Yes, that's the scene, and they bring up Looney Tunes.
Oh, yeah, but okay, so let me get to it.
And it's meant to be flirtatious.
Yeah, I remember that. That was weird. That whole movie's fucking weird when you think about it.
Yeah. We promised we wouldn't do these tangents, folks.
Yes. Yes, sometimes it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But, and then we get another, where they talk about, like, they always talk about what it would be like to meet alien life, and she was the lucky one going into space, but, like, now he's finally found evidence of alien life, and he's not sure he wants it anymore. Also, it's an interesting choice to make it a Mars mission, considering in the original versions, the aliens are speculated to have come from Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not in this version, presumably because, science marching on.
True.
And,
but that didn't stop Species 2.
No, it didn't. Can't stop a series with that many sequels now, can you?
Yeah.
Unless it's Friday the 13th. Well, okay, so back in the subway tunnel, the area is now covered in ice. Our main four characters, along with four members of Breen's reclamation team, Lufford, Polk, Diego, and Jensen. And I'm just picturing the fucking saber-toothed tiger from Ice Age, the Dennis Leary saber-toothed tiger. They suit up in modified spacesuits to enter the corridor, and they find that the temperature inside is now 50 degrees, the suits can stand up to 100, and that the corridor branches off. Roni remarks that the ship seems larger on the inside, so it's a TARDIS.
Oh, yeah, there's our reference.
Yeah, I knew I was going to have to bring up Doctor Who. And so this is where he speculates it's a hypersphere. Oh, so it's branching off of Cube 2. A four-dimensional sphere existing in non-Euclidean space. There's our Lovecraft reference. And the inside could potentially be infinite, meaning the aliens have found a way to warp space. Also, this part reminds me of Sphere. The way they explore the spaceship and that. And so Breen orders Jensen to mark their paths every 50 meters with the GPS. Or as Potter puts it, a trail of breadcrumbs. You know, I always find it funny that that's like the phrase that's kind of entered into like our culture. When if you read Hansel and Gretel, the trail of breadcrumbs doesn't work.
Yeah.
I've always thought that was funny. That's when Lufford cries out and fires his gun saying he saw a figure moving, which Polk backs up, and Diego says nothing showed up on the infrared. Like, maybe you're not reading it right. And Breen orders everyone to hold fire unless he gives his say-so. And as they move off, Roni thinks she sees movement down one of the branching corridors, but she keeps that to herself. And so they continue into the ship through increasingly Escher-esque corridors, or the Winchester House on acid, as Polk calls it. I'm like, that's a hell of a description.
Yeah.
And so Roni spots what looks like a porthole covered in condensation on the corridor wall and wipes it clean. Finding the room on the other side is full of hundreds of preserved hominids.
Oh, I was just thinking, what if they use like a lot of like really good matte paintings for this?
Yeah, that could be cool. But it's 97, so...
Oh, yeah. Mortal Kombat Annihilation level of CG, especially if this is New Line.
Oh, no. Oh, no. I would hope not.
Like a notch above the animation in Mortal Kombat 4.
Jesus. But Mother, you're alive. Too bad you will die. And so, yeah, Quatermass wonders they're being altered in some way, and Potter connects it to the larger brain cases and higher intelligence of the specimens found so far. And that's when Jensen screams and drops to his knees, the inside of his faceplate spattered with blood. And he starts ranting about how he saw hundreds of them, and he was one of them, taking off and flying into the sky, and then he screams, "They're in us!" And tries to shoot Roni with his rifle, only for Breen to shoot him in the arm and throw him off. So yeah, Breen did something helpful. And Jensen then runs off down the corridor, and this is kind of unintentionally funny. He's screaming, and suddenly he's heard... he screams and it sounds like it's falling. So he's like, oh! Totally where they would put the Wilhelm in.
Yeah.
And the group follows the path he took, finding a circular aperture in the floor, opening into a huge chamber. So he just ran headfirst into the hole. Did he do the friggin' like Wile E. Coyote thing where he ran for a few feet, then realized and fell? Their helmet lights are too weak, so Breen fires also magnesium flares, which apparently have parachutes attached to them. Revealing a massive, hive-like spherical chamber 100 yards across. The walls are covered with 7-sided polygonal cells, sealed off with a translucent substance, and Jensen's battered corpse is visible down below. Rhodey compares the chamber to a beehive, and Potter, using a pair of night vision binoculars, I'm thinking Jurassic Park now, can make out shapes inside some of the cells.
Thinking of Event Horizon.
Oh yeah, true. This whole exploration of the ship is a bit like that.
Yeah. Same year.
And also life.
Actually, you know what? I think this was like this draft is like dated the same month as Event Horizon.
Yeah, that was July 97, I think.
Just coincidence, but yeah.
Yeah, and so Quatermass, using hives as a model, says they must be larvae. And I do like that they expanded on the inside of the spaceship in this version. I think that's a cool expansion to the idea.
Definitely. Maybe if I would hope that like if Nigel Neal came away from anything like praising anything about the script, it would be that.
Well, I think he would at least be able to say like, yeah, it is Quatermass in the pit.
Mm-hmm. He probably just didn't like its characterization.
He would not like the Quatermass in this, considering how much he hated the Don Levy Quatermass. Mm-hmm. To the point where he basically was making shit up about Don Levy being like drunk off his ass the entire time and like not knowing his lines. So Breen and Quatermass descend into the chamber on cables coming down to where Jensen's corpse is. And his fall has broken open several of the cells, and Breen inspects the nearest one, finding a cocoon shape surrounded by a viscous jelly.
One thing I always like in the 67 movie, when they find these cells, or like when they break open, it sounds like, have you ever walked on ice where there's just air underneath and it cracks open?
Yeah, I've heard the sound.
Yeah, that's what that sound and effect in the movie reminded me of.
Yeah, and so as Brain slices into the cocoon with a retractable knife, we jump ahead to the paleontology lab at Columbia University, where the main four examine the cocoon while wearing contamination suits. And
I'm getting reminded of Species.
Uh-huh. Roni cuts into it, revealing it. I'm actually getting reminded of Evolution. It's in.
We should probably do an episode on the original Don Jacoby script.
Oh,
someday.
is that out there?
Yeah, we've had it for years.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, when it was written as like a straightforward sci-fi horror film.
Yeah, that would actually. Yeah. Wait a minute. What else did he write? Vampires,
Life Force,
Invaders
from Mars.
Yeah, I was wondering if he did Life Force or if it was just Invaders from Mars.
And Death Wish 3, although he used a pseudonym on that.
Yeah, Death Wish 3, hell yeah. But Roni cuts into it, revealing an alien life form that the script refers to as a chimera. It's an insect-like being that resembles a winged devil, even though later they say only the adults have wings, so that's confusing. Complete with horns, a barbed tail, and cloven hooves. So it's even more devil-like than the original, where it was just a bug.
Yeah.
And that was another thing I think was slightly better about the TV version, is that the bugs were a little more convincing looking.
Which is funny, considering it's made for TV on a low budget.
And so we then go to the Control and Command Center. Oh, here's one where it's not underlined for no reason. Where an argument is in progress, only for Grange to enter and things to quiet down. He asks Quatermass to catch him up on what's happened, and he shows Grange some autopsy slides of the alien. Grange says it looks like a gargoyle, and Quatermass concurs, saying they're old friends and we haven't seen in some time, and hands it off to Roni. She shows Grange depictions of similar creatures from throughout human history, and even their own people have called them demons, which she thinks is correct. And Quatermass is like, okay, woman, shut up, it's my turn. Quatermass elaborates, saying that primitive man must have seen them and lumped them in with their existing beliefs, which eventually evolved into religious dogma. And he even includes the Judeo-Christian story about Lucifer and the fallen angels, which isn't actually that old, but and says
isn't that like Paradise Lost stuff?
Yeah, it's kind of Paradise Lost kind of codified it, and it's based off of bits and pieces from other places.
Mm-hmm.
And says, by all intents and purposes, they found Satan, to which Potter wryly remarks, I'd like to see the Catholic Church's react. Yeah,
so many jokes. As somebody who grew up Catholic, I can make so many jokes right now.
Yeah, they'd make Quatermass transfer. And so Grange asks for practical information about the aliens, and Quatermass rattles off their physical features and speculates that they maybe came from a gas giant similar to Jupiter. I'm like, okay, hold on. You can't evolve on a gas giant.
It doesn't work that way!
Also, I've noticed in like the two scenes where Quatermass has to like explain stuff to people, he starts with the crazy shit first and then goes into the scientific facts.
Maybe he's wondering why now he was laughed out of Washington.
Yeah, maybe you should have. Yeah.
You're going about this. You're going about scientific discussions all wrong here, buddy.
Yeah, you're not quite going full David Icke, but
I mean, nobody goes full David Icke.
Yeah, nobody.
Again, getting back into the racism part of those conspiracy theories.
Oh God, yeah.
But he's reversing the Mott and Bailey argument. He's starting from, no, he actually isn't. He's starting from the least defensible position and then moving back to the defensible positions. So he's starting with the absurd explanation and then going back to like what we already know about science.
Yep.
Except it's legitimate.
And that's when he drops the bombshell. The creature was still alive when they started the autopsy. And they found traces of machines called nanoagents the size of molecules in the bloodstream, which may have been used to induce suspended animation, and Hideo Kojima just came.
We need to mail this script to him.
Yeah, that, and with a case of Monster Energy.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not, considering he took that out of the director's cut, but, you know.
Which came? Oh, Death Stranding?
Death Stranding. And so this means that the others could still wake up, and Quatermass points out this one is an immature specimen, and that if the aliens complete their metamorphosis, things would be very bad. Quatermass wants to gather more information, and after reiterating that schizophrenics seem to be the most receptive to the ship's signals, proposes that they take Boone into the ship and record what he sees, using a device called an optic encephalograph. This is a plot point which I'm surprised they kept.
Yeah.
Because it's such a weird thing.
Yeah, it's just it would not fly today, I don't think.
It's even funnier in the TV version because they're just in Roni's lab, and Quatermass goes like, "Oh, you still have that thing over there." And he then has its inventor, Demetrius Yannick, and now I'm just singing a Prometheus again, from MIT, explain how it works. Basically, it's a VR-like headset that detects visual impressions in the brain by tapping into the visual cortex of the subject. Honestly,
it's better than Halloween 666.
Yeah, it's making me think of that thing from Ghostbusters that they put on fucking Rick Moranis and they see the dog.
Yes, yeah.
So yeah, a bit of a Nigel Neal influence there. In fact, the Calder building kind of reminds me of the building from that movie.
Yeah. I mean, granted, there are even, like, Lovecraftian elements in Ghostbusters.
That's because, like, Dan Aykroyd's like a real fucking believer, but we'll get
Oh,
back.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but Yannick has had great success, he said, on chimpanzees. Brain dismisses the idea, wanting to make a preemptive strike, but Grange decides to give Quatermass 12 hours to try this idea before they escalate things. So instead of the split being skepticism, it's how to handle the situation. And the way things are in this script, I can kind of understand wanting to skip to just blowing the thing up.
Yeah.
Back in the subway station, the ship starts to vibrate again, and the men guarding it start to back away as the objects around them start trembling on account of another anti-gravity wave expanding out from the hull. This continues above ground, where the blackout area expands further and the gravity goes haywire, causing a helicopter to crash into a building, and the soldiers on the ground quickly flee the growing zero gravity.
Uh-oh, they write near ground zero. I'm like, guys, this is New York. This is New York.
Yeah, ooh. But I mean, it was 4 years before that.
Yeah, 4 years. Yeah.
It's a Quatermass, Potter, Roni, and 2 armed soldiers arrive at Metropolitan Hospital. Finding the power has gone out and only a crazed patient is manning the nurse station, who literally has no pants on. That's how you know they're crazy. While screaming is heard coming from the lockdown ward. You know what this is reminding me of? The hospital sequence from Silent Hill Revelation. A little bit. Sorry, MJ, if you're listening to this. I look forward to Red Sonja.
I haven't chatted with her in a while. I haven't listened to her live. I mean, I've been busy, so I just haven't listened to her live streams in a while, but yeah. Don't worry, dude. We're not that well connected. I know you think that all trans women know each other, but, we don't.
Yeah, it's not a psychic...
I've only messaged her a few times.
It's not a psychic hotline.
Yeah.
It actually works.
All trans women who are Robert E. Howard fans, like the Wachowskis, Bassett, and myself. I don't know of anyone else.
And so Potter blows the keypad lock off the wall to allow them access to the lockdown ward, which that wouldn't work, but it's like in the movie lexicon now, so I just accept it when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And they find Dr. O'Connell bound with 4-point restraints and hanged from the ceiling with a fire hose, so she's dead.
Yeah.
Quite an eerie image. And Quatermass grabs the keycard off her body and they continue into the ward, finding the rooms full of dead or dying staff and inmates, and crude finger paintings of winged beings on the walls. And this is the one where it's poop, and it says it's excrement, it says, and other assorted materials. So it's like the cover of Peter Gabriel's Passion album. Crickets. And so a crazed Castleman jumps the group and attempts to stab one of the soldiers in the eye with a hypodermic needle, but Potter and the other soldier got him down, so this is like that scene where the exposed brain monster jumps out at Heather and then she shoots it. His last words as he dies are, "They're coming!" So it's Poltergeist reference.
Mm-hmm.
They soon come to Boone's cell, where he stands at the observation window as if waiting for them. And he knows that they're planning on taking him down into the pit because they... And Boone then attacks, throwing paint in the soldiers' faces and grabbing one of their guns, only for Roni to spray him in the face with a fire extinguisher while Potter sedates him. And as he loses consciousness, Boone sees Quatermass's face transform into a chimera's, and he screams. It sounds like a cool effect, but I'm just imagining the morphing from the Stand miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
Oh god, Jamie Sheridan is Quatermass. No. So we cut to an operating room where Quatermass and Yannick fit the OEG onto Boone's head. It transfers an image to a nearby monitor showing the POV of the others standing over him. His POV of the others standing over him. And they soon arrive via helicopter to the new zone perimeter, where Breen informs that the zone of influence has expanded faster than expected. That's making me think of Annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, completely coincidental.
Yeah. I was going to say, if anybody could do like a Nigel Neal adaptation today, it would be Alex Garland.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if he doesn't go bizarre and random like he kind of did with Men.
Well, I mean, with that, he was going out. He was drawing on mythology, and it's more of a metaphor than literal.
Okay, so anything not nailed down is still floating in zero gravity, including a shitload of crack files. And so the group is soon outfitted in the spacesuits again, this time with nitrogen-propelled manned maneuvering units designed to help them move around in the zero-G environment. So Quatermass, Roney, Potter, and Breen, along with Diego and Lufford from the previous team, they enter the zero-G zone, dragging the sedated Boone behind them, so he's just floating. And using the MMUs, they make their way through the floating debris, heading for the Calder building. Suddenly, a car rushes at them at something like 90 miles per hour and crushes Lufford to death against a nearby building, so his space chute was colored red. And Diego goes to fire his gun without thinking, and the recoil makes him tumble away down the street, never to be seen again.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I probably would have had it where it knocks him back and he ends up hitting a wall and splatting.
Yeah.
That's probably what I would have done, and then his body just sort of like floats down then, and that would have been a cool effect.
It would be a cool looking scene. It reminds me of how almost every Alien 3 script has a zero-G fight at the end of it.
Which we're trying to restore in our rewrite.
Yeah, the first Gibson draft has it, the second doesn't. But the Eric Red draft has one, and so does the David Towie draft.
Mm-hmm.
That it was just interesting how they kept trying to do that, and then they never did it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that describes a lot of Alien 3.
Oh, yeah. And so the Prophet attacks Potter, trying to stab him with the knife, while the others attack the other team members. Breen fights off one attacker by lighting a magnesium flare in his face, with or without the parachute.
Oh, going back to the character of Castleman, my idea for casting, George Buckflower.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, also Carpenter regular.
He said, I was the president. Yeah, I wonder if Carpenter would have been up to make this. Not in 97, I don't think.
Yeah, I know. Although he had just done, I mean, I assume that this was being talked for New Line Cinema, where he had done In the Mouth of Madness, so you never know.
Yeah, it's possible. But so Potter is saved by the now awake Boone, who strangles the Prophet with his tether until he blacks out. Maybe he's dead, maybe not. And the other attackers flee now their leader has been taken down. And the team continues on its way. They soon enter the Calder building, which is covered in a layer of frost, and descend into the subway tunnels, which are now encased in ice. They soon reach the ship just as gravity begins to return to normal, so just in the nick of way too late. And they enter the ship, which had now increased in temperature to 75 degrees, and follow the GPS markers they set the last time. And the corridors are also humming, which Roney says makes it almost seem alive, so it's a Leviathan from Farscape.
Mm-hmm.
As they reach the entrance to the hive chamber, Boone freezes, not wanting to continue. Quatermass tries to talk him into it, but Breen and Potter have to wrestle him to the ground and force him to look. Yeah, let's manhandle the mentally ill person. And we get a POV shot where he sees movement within each of the cells like fetuses in a womb, and freaks out screaming, "They're alive!" And so, back at the zone perimeter, Breen has Boone taken away in an ambulance, ordering him to be taken to the control and command center and kept locked up. And this must be the slowest ambulance in the world, because he's still in it like 30 pages from now. Quatermass consults with Yannick about the OEG recording, and the man looks visibly shook up. And then we cut straight to the White House Situation Room, where Quatermass, Roney, and Potter are present, along with President Thatcher, with an F, Grange...
Yeah, that threw me for a loop.
And a whole slew of national security advisors, cabinet members, etc. Could you imagine if they tried to actually make it?
You could make all the Monica Lewinsky jokes right now.
Do you think I could beat the aliens by coming?
Oh no, and it'd be even funnier to be played by his brother, who ended up being in Pumpkinhead 2 Blood Wings.
Oh my god, I did not know that.
That's my favorite line of that, because he plays like the mayor who's trying to profit off of it. He goes, "Tragedy, ain't it?"
That is really funny, actually. But yeah, there's all these national security advisors, cabinet members. Basically, it sounds like everybody in Washington has crammed into this room.
Mm-hmm.
So Quatermass presents the video recorded at the OEG to the room, describing it as a memory stored for millions of years in the ship's hull. And it first shows the adult chimeras hatching from their cells in the hive aboard the ship, before shifting the scene to another world as the alien swarm flies through the air, attacking each other as a massive luminescent entity rises into the air and roars toward us, just coming into focus as the video cuts to static. And Quatermass describes the swarm as the fact that inspired the Legend of the Wild Hunt, the Phantom Ride of Devils and Witches in the Sky. That's an impossibly long video game now. And I will say, this is another thing that I think is a little bit better done in the TV version, because the video that they show in that, it's still very primitive, and like the bugs don't move very well, but like it's a lot more brutal. Mm-hmm. Like you see their heads exploding, you see them getting torn apart, you see one like badly wounded trying to crawl away. Like it's honestly really disturbing. And the Hammer version is not up to snuff. Really.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, that was like one of Neil's only criticisms of the movie was that, Hammer always had terrible special effects.
Mixing it with good special effects, that's the other odd thing.
Yeah. And so he thinks that the video depicts a ritual purging of all mutations to preserve the hive, something seen on Earth among termites and wasps, and the President's like, well, how does this relate to us humans? And Quatermass...
Hold on. What does that have to do with us?
Hey, we got Frank Caliendo on the podcast now.
I'm trying to do Mike Clinton.
Yeah. Quatermass says he thinks that the ship isn't just causing the wave of madness in New York, but is also feeding off it.
Well,
go ahead.
Definition of what? That depends on... it depends on your definition of is.
Can't get very far in life that saying is, can you? But no, so they first arrived on Earth, humans weren't a good enough source of energy for them. It drops a bombshell. The aliens use nanotechnology on humans to manipulate hominid genetics. Yeah, they weren't good enough for our batteries to power the Matrix until we used nanomachines on them. And having expended all their energy on the journey to Earth, they modified humans in their own image as a form of colonization by proxy. We continued to evolve as they intended, with the compulsion to kill and cleanse, coded into our very genetics, building towards a single final purge. And this has now begun thanks to the ship's influence.
That is actually, like, I'm not talking to my friend about this, but, like, the belief that, like, a lot of, like, our genocides or, like, atrocities are, like, an instinctual or, like, a unconscious effort of germ warfare, essentially, like, that whole idea of, like, maintaining, your line of DNA, in a battle for resources is also conscious.
Yeah. So yeah, Nigel Neal was very forward thinking.
Yeah.
And so the president says, we have no choice but to use God's hammer. And they're like, what the hell is that? And so Grange explains they have B-52s flying over New York, carrying ground-penetrating mini-nukes, ready to drop them on the Calder building. And this will effectively wipe out most of New York, killing roughly 2 to 3 million people. Which, that number sounds on the small side.
I mean, COVID did half of the job already.
Ouch.
On just America.
Ouch. Timely News presents...
Screenplay Archaeology was good, but then they talk about politics.
That's really funny, because we hardly ever do.
It's only relevant when it's to a script.
Yeah.
But then again, I am, like, a political junkie in real life, because it kind of reflects through my work, and also the fact that I'm, again, trans, so it's just kind of something I'm always consciously aware of, unfortunately.
Yeah. Alright, so Quatermass is like, oh god, no, tries to talk the president out of this, saying a nuke would just provide a greater energy boost to the ship, but the president feels he has no other choice. Quatermass angrily exits the room, and Runny follows him into the hallway, where he once again gets very pissed off. He's like pacing furiously. Mm-hmm. And he despairs that once again there's an incoming disaster, he can't do anything about it.
This script is much better than Aaron Sorkin's writing, though, so,
I don't think I've ever read an Aaron Sorkin script.
Or watched West Wing.
I've seen a few episodes. I've seen Steve Jobs.
Yeah, well, no, the problem with, like, the West Wing, I mean, the problem with Aaron Sorkin is, like, again, going into politics here, centrist mindset that, like, oh, we're all in it for the greater good. I'm like, no.
Oh, I have seen that cringy clip from the newsroom where they're on the plane, talking about Bin Laden. Oh my god. But no, so back in New York, because remember, this is a New York script, the 10th Mountain Division is fighting a pitched war in the streets with the city's inhabitants, and vacant-eyed people have gathered at the zone's perimeter like pilgrims. Whether or not they have the hats, I don't know.
Then again, the pilgrims say commit genocide.
Okay, Wednesday Addams. The operation is coordinated by Breen, the command and control center, which is apparently designed to withstand 9 megatons. I didn't know one police plaza was that well kitted out.
Can it withstand Olivier Megaton?
Nothing could withstand Olivier Megaton.
His poor sense of direction.
Let's just say if he was hired on to direct a Marvel movie, the MCU would be dead within the month. God, why was there a scene of Captain America walking down the street with 12 cuts?
Well, it is funny because the director of Transport 2 did direct The Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, he did that instead of Transporter 3.
Well, and the director of the Transporter was supposed to direct, what was it, Gambit?
Was it?
Yeah, isn't it? Or wait, I'm not thinking Doug Liman directed it.
No, he didn't.
He did not direct... I got my 2002 action movies confused.
No, Doug Liman did the Bourne Identity.
I know. Okay. It's 11. It's after 11 people. I don't know why
shit, it is. Yeah. But yeah, we're almost done with this. So We're getting close to the end. And so they're observed from the White House Situation Room, where Quatermass and Roney have entered again, via a satellite and camera mounted under the cockpit on Mustang 1, their lead bomber. And they lock onto the target, and President Thatcher relays them to the order to fire through Breen. And the minis Dukes strike all around the Calder building, but the explosion soon collapses in on itself, which just makes me think of the opening of Akira.
Mm-hmm.
And gravity returns to normal. Then the vibrating soon starts again, though, and within the remains of the building, an eerie light starts to pulse in time with the humming. So yeah, we're really getting into it now.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's confused about what just happened, except for Quatermass, who knows fucking everything, who mutters that they've given the Chimeras exactly what they want. And this is a much better movie to use the term Chimera than Mission Impossible 2, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the subway tunnel, the ice is melting, gravity is resuming, the ship has begun to pulse with light, nearly transparent. We go inside the ship to the hive chamber, where the polygonal cells tear open, and thousands of adult chimeras emerge. They take flight, eventually bursting out of the Calder building en masse and swarm through Harlem. Also,
and then I have to assume that this is also where Nigel Neal would draw contention.
Yeah, because having the aliens still be alive I think it dilutes the message about what it's trying to do with human nature.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, it's not bad in and of the script, but if you're thinking about what the theme of the story is supposed to be, it's kind of a little off the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since the swarm doesn't do a lot.
Yeah. Well, I assume this was like a studio note.
Possibly. Because it does feel a little thrown in.
Yeah.
But hey, cool creature effects at least. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's done right. Yeah.
And so as the Situation Room continues watching over camera feeds, the deep vibrations are heard in the command and control room in New York, driving everyone mad, including Breen, and they all start attacking each other. The Situation Room watches this until the feed goes dead, and an advisor gets in a report that nothing at all seems to hurt them. Not bullets, not nothing. And so back in New York, the swarm descends on the people of the city, killing off the news crew from earlier. Bye, so glad to have known you. And one of the aliens attacks the ambulance carrying Boone, who climbs up onto the roof and laughs madly as he watches the chimeras attacking people. So yeah, that ambulance must have gotten stuck in traffic or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so back in Washington, Roney retreats into an empty conference room where she finds Quatermass going over the OEG video again, trying to find a solution. He looks through photos of the ship's interior, looks to the case with the bloodstone sword in it, and listens to the audio recording of Boone again, zeroing in on the part where he mentions that iron hinders, cold. As Roney waves Potter into the room, Quatermass thinks he has it figured out. Iron was used to cast out the devil, and the people who forged the sword from pure iron must have known this. Cold iron might be able to disrupt the nano agents holding the chimeras together. And I'm like, okay, I don't buy that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really? Come on. And Quatermass then expands on the idea, remembering that the Calder building was decorated with cast iron, which must have acted like a cage dampening the energy of the ship. And this all started when the building began to be dismantled. And if they can trigger an implosion on the building, they can bury the ship in iron and disrupt the hive mind, which he thinks is being funneled through the ship like some sort of transmitter. Disrupting that should disrupt the entire swarm. So, like the droid army in the Phantom Menace.
God, I'm trying to think of all the Phantom Menace jokes I can pull out right now.
Let's try spinning. That's a new trick.
Or maybe Blair would whisper. I think I might have gone a bit too far in some places.
Some other motherfuckers always trying to ice skate up there.
Have you ever seen the making of episode 1 documentary?
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, it gets hilarious, especially when you get to post-production. Like George Lucas is having a screening for it, and you can tell like people are like nervous around him the entire time, like they're laughing at his dumb jokes.
No.
And like he's like riffing on it as they're watching. At the end, the editor is trying to give notes on like, okay, well, you're going for all these different tones and in like a short amount of time. And in the background, Rick McCallum, the producer, is just sitting there, resting on his hand, just going like, I didn't challenge any of this until now. And then later this is all at Skywalker Ranch in like, I assume their kitchen. Like George Lucas, the editor, and Rick McCallum are like standing around like debating on what they need to do going forward. And it almost feels like the punch was almost thrown. But yeah.
Yeah, it gets funny that we're on Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And so they soon fly into New York aboard the Blackhawk. He loves those Blackhawks in the script, I swear.
Well, I mean, military helicopter.
Yep, and so Potter has a backpack full of C4 charges dusted with iron pyrite that they plan to use to collapse the building, and they are soon pursued by a trio of chimeras, leading to a chase scene through the city, with the helicopter needing to dodge both chimeras and buildings.
This is better than Godzilla 98 still.
Oh god, yeah, it is. Goddamn Chrysler building. And so one slams into the helicopter side and clings to it while another crashes through the windshield and attacks the pilot. And the helicopter spins out, hitting a chimera with its rotor, which shatters the drive shaft and causes the helicopter to crash into a gas station, spewing fuel everywhere. So this is like multiple Resident Evil cutscenes put together.
It really is, especially with Chimera.
Oh god, yeah. Those the weird fly guys never show up again.
Just don't ask John Landis to direct this.
Oh god, no.
We're bringing out the edge, folks.
You would end up like the theatrical cut of Halloween 6, where Quatermass just disappears from the movie. It's just a random shot going, no! In the background. And so Roni manages to free herself from the wreckage as Quatermass and Potter stir, but she's soon attacked by the Chimera that was going after the pilot and was flung away from the helicopter by the crash. And it almost gets her before Quatermass attacks it with the Bloodstone sword, stabbing it and making it vaporize. And the sword flies off into the street, and a mob of crazed people appears, so now we're getting more into Quatermass in the pit stuff.
Yeah. Oh, well, the whole sword thing is also now reminding me of Light Force.
Yeah, it's a lot like Light Force, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that happens with the sword later that reminds me of an early 2000s movie, which I'll mention it when we get there.
Oh boy. It's not Ballistic X versus Sever, is it?
No. It's, I'll tell it to you when you get there, but it has things in common with Batman and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay.
But so they need to run for it, but Potter goes back to the helicopter to get the C4, just barely getting out before the fuel ignites, creating a wall of flame between them and the mob. But the crazy people don't care. They charge straight through the fire, causing the three to flee, and they slip into an alley and emerge onto a street that is sometimes Lexington Avenue, sometimes not, depending on how Goyer describes it.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, finding themselves in the middle of a full-scale riot, with people committing horrible acts under the influence of the humming coming from the ship, and Quatermass is soon affected as well, and he gets separated from the other two by the crowd. And
hold on here. I just noticed something strange on page 98.
Yeah?
On the upper left-hand corner, there's like this text that's almost whited out, and I have no idea if that's like from another page or if what. And
oh yeah, I can see it. Maybe it was a shitty photocopy.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the first pages were like edit still.
Yeah, because presumably Roger Christian photocopied it.
Well, I assume it was still in its binder, I could assume.
Yeah, possibly. But so Potter and Roni get swept along as well, with Roni getting separated from Potter, and she comes under attack from the crowd, and we almost get Freddy Krueger's origin story in the streets of New York.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it almost becomes a gang rape. But but then someone pulls her out into an alley, and it's Boone, who wields the Bloodstone sword and raises it above his head and holds it there for like the next 5 minutes. And so we go.
He's just doing an E-Man pose.
I have the power. I literally read a script recently where it ends with a character screaming, "I have the power!" While he's like pulsing with energy. I'm like, holy shit, it's E-Man. So go to the Caller building, where crazed people are making their way down to the ship, lit up by the eerie light as the chimeras cling to the beams above. In the subway tunnel, the people fall to their knees before the ship, which is now turned light gold and translucent, showing the organic circuitry within. I love the idea of it being a living ship.
Yeah.
It also,
I'm kind of, you know what? Reminding me now of just this year, Jordan Peele's Nope.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because like people have speculated. People have speculated that thing in that movie is actually not a spaceship; it's an angel.
Well, I thought it was pretty transparent that it was just a living being. So,
well, yeah, a living being, yes, but like the explanation that makes the most sense to me out of that movie is that it's an angel, because the story is very biblical, and if you ever read the Bible or like how angels are described in the Bible, it's really bizarre.
Well, I mean, it also has a connection to the Scorpion King, and part of that movie takes place in Gomorrah, so yeah, biblical.
Yeah.
Sorry,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, like the whole living ship aspect is what this is reminding me of.
Yeah, it's also reminding me of, once again, of Farscape, only it's not being piloted by a New Zealand alien with his Kiwi accent.
Mm-hmm.
And so back on, it also now appears to be emitting energy instead of absorbing it. And back on Lexington Avenue, Potter finds Quatermass again and tries to yank him away from the crowd, only for the crazed scientist to try to strangle him to death. And here's where they're giving Potter some of Roni's role from the original.
Mm-hmm.
And so Potter grabs a piece of masonry, bashes Quatermass in the face with it, and he responds by trying to wander back off into the crowd. So Potter's like, dear fucking God, drags him away again and tries talking to him, imploring him to fight it and think. This gets through to Quatermass, who now recognizes Potter, and they hide inside a nearby bar. Like, this is beat for beat what they do in the originals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, only it's like a proper English pub in that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's really funny is that in the movie, there's a scene where he takes the flask and goes, well, I don't normally before noon. When in the TV version, he's introduced drinking at his club at like 10 in the morning. And so Quatermass says the vibrations make you see their world and that he instinctively wanted to kill Potter. And Potter reveals that he's diabetic and as such must be a threat to the genetic purity of the hive. And Quatermass then asks after Roni, and Potter says, I don't know, we got separated. Oops.
Thank God Potter didn't make out with Syl. It all comes back to, I mean, granted, I love the movie Species, so maybe that's why I'm just bringing that up over and over again.
Yeah. And so back in the alleyway, Boone is still holding the sword up. And then he brings it down, striking a chimera that was behind Roni. And he goes like, oh, I picked up the sword after watching the helicopter crash. And then flies a few boards away from the end of the alley, leading her onto Lexington Avenue, which is confusing because they should have just been leaving Lexington. And it's all been flattened aside from the glowing Calder building. And after a rumbling sound is heard, Boone says that the devil is coming back soon and that they have to get moving. And so the subway tunnel is now filled with people, and the ship is now completely transparent. The hum increases to a high-pitched whine, and one of the people reaches out and touches it, getting vaporized just as everyone else in the tunnel is melted. Which is, the way it's described is really cool, is that their flesh melts off their bones, and then their bones collapse and crumble. It's like the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark on acid.
Oh, yeah.
And the street in front of the building erupts, and a huge crater opens up, exposing the glowing ship to the air, and tendrils of light wind up into the sky, where they begin to mesh into a shape. A violent tremor rocks the bar, and Quatermass is nearly overcome by the compulsion again, saying that it feels stronger now. And the building begins to be torn apart, and Quatermass says they are running out of time to stop it, and he and Potter leave the bar, and they run down Lexington Avenue guided by the cloud of light gathering above the city. And they soon climb over a pile of rubble near the Calder building and find themselves looking down upon the ship. Despite the blinding light, Quatermass can make out two figures standing nearby and calls out to Roni. And so Boone and Roni are at the edge of the crater, and they see that not only is it beginning to flood because of the broken water mains, but also that the glowing hull is now sublimated into the shape hovering over the city, with the chimeras swarming around it. And Boone yells that they're too late and runs toward the Calder building, and Roni goes to follow, but a nearby brick wall collapses and buries her leg in debris, breaking it. And as she tries to free herself, the shape extends 100 feet upwards and becomes clearly defined, described as a mix of Dores, Satan, and Cthulhu that can cause madness just by looking at it. Which that's a really cool way to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so Boone looks back at the figure, then looks at the iron scaffolding on the building and starts to climb it. And the figure is referred to as the Satan manifestation in this.
Mm-hmm.
And so Roni is still staring at the figure when Quatermass calls to her and snaps her out of it. He and Potter lift the debris off her leg and take her to the relative shelter of the Calder building's lobby. And as Boone continues his climb, Quatermass examines Roni's leg and Potter asks him what the figure is. Quatermass explains it's the focus of what's going on, the ship transformed into a psychic projection of the hive mind. He notes that it is still grounded and says if they can collapse the iron onto it and connect it to the water, then they can discharge it like a lightning rod, which is the plan from both other versions.
Mm-hmm.
And Potter hands a cluster of C4 to Quatermass, saying to split up and take two different corners, applying the explosives to one load-bearing beam each. And the activation code is 1977, the year Elvis died, which has to be entered twice, and both charges are slaved to Potter's detonator, and when the light goes green, they'll have 2 minutes to get out of it. And so Potter sets off. Quatermass stops to say goodbye to Roni, randomly going like, I'm going to touch your face like a creep. And then she responds by kissing him, and he promises to return, setting off in the opposite direction to Potter. This is not the worst written romantic interest subplot I've seen, but it is very kind of basic.
It is. Again, I bring up Species again, where in that movie the romance, even if it's sudden, makes total sense considering that the whole movie revolves around sex, and the love triangle of Bill, and Michael Madsen and Doctor characters. Like that whole romance fits with the theme of that movie.
Yeah.
In fact, the ending of the script kind of reminds me of the alternate ending of Species, where they're on the pier. I wish that scene had been kept in the final cut of that movie, because it summed up everything nicely. But yeah, we'll get to that later here.
Yeah, so Boone continues to climb, knocking loose some glass and almost kills Quatermass, who then begins setting up his charge. Elsewhere, Potter starts getting his C4 set up. He's almost finished when a shadow falls over him, revealing the badly burned Breen, who must have walked all the way there from one police plaza. I looked at the map. They did fly there from DC in a helicopter, so had time.
Mm-hmm.
But man, his shoes should be shredded.
Yeah, and I thought I'd do a lot of walking around at where I work for web fulfillment.
He shoots Potter in the chest and his clip runs out, and before Breen reloads and shoots him in the head, Potter manages to push the button on the detonator. And so Quatermass watches the light on his charge turn green and heads back for Roni and runs into Breen as he gets there. And so we go to Boone, who's reached the top of the building, screams, and waves the sword as the figure turns to look at him. Now, what this reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen Reign of Fire.
No, I have not.
It's a post-apocalyptic dragon movie starring Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey.
I've heard about it, yeah.
Yeah, and in the climax of that movie, Matthew McConaughey is at the top of a smokestack. He has like a medieval battle axe. He goes like, and runs off and like jumps at a dragon with it. Mm-hmm. That's the scene.
Yeah. David Goyer didn't write that movie, did he?
I don't think so, no. It was directed by Rob Bowman, if you want another connection to the X-Files.
Better TV director than he is film director.
Yeah, he made the Lex.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Alan Taylor. Great HBO director, mediocre at best film director.
Mm-hmm. Even he'll admit to that, though.
Yeah, when his best critically received movie is one that's basically been described as a glorified backdoor pilot for a Sopranos prequel series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, I totally was thinking Reign of Fire with this. And as the countdown continues, I like that the figure moves in this version. That would be a very cool visual.
Mm-hmm.
And as the countdown continues, Breen screams like a chimera and attacks Quatermass. A fight ensuing, and Quatermass can't beat him in a pure fight, and ends up pushing Breen in the way of a fallen beam that impales and kills him, Omen style. And he has this line, he's like, "That's for Rachel, you son of a bitch." I'm like, yeah, he doesn't know you're there. And Quatermass finds Roni, helps her out of the building just in time, with 20 seconds left on the countdown. She looks over her shoulder and sees Boone waving his sword defiantly at the figure just before the explosives go off. And so Quatermass and Roni take cover behind a pile of rubble, and Boone falls along with the collapsing building right into the heart of the manifestation. The cast iron pierces its heart, sending out waves of disrupting force, and the Chimera swarm catches fire and disintegrates as it falls from the sky, so it was a load-bearing boss. The figure continues to ride with crackling energy until a bright burst of white light appears. When it fades, the figure and the building are gone. Quatermass tells Roni it's over, which he's sure of since he doesn't hear them anymore.
You know what the cast iron building was reminding me of? Trying that David Goyer co-wrote the new Hellraiser, the building that has the metal on.
That's it. That's what I was thinking of this whole fucking time. Yeah, that's it. That movie he has a story credit on.
Yeah, a screen story, yeah.
Yeah, and so the crater has been fused into glass, and the Bloodstone sword is in the center. It's embedded in the ground, so now it's Excalibur. or just the sword and the stone, because they're not always the same thing. Sorry, I had to be a nerd there for a second. And so it then goes back to Roche Harbor, where Quatermass once again brings his kayak back to the beach near his cabin. His dog greets him again as he looks up at the stars, and will be interrupted by Rhodey, who's waiting for him in the cabin. They kiss and go inside, and ends on a shot of Orion with the star Beetlejuice. And so she apparently is okay with living with a shitload of octopi.
I wonder if the whole star shimmering at the end is meant to be a sign of further things to come.
Yeah, because isn't that where the ship should be passing? So yeah, I think that might have been what he was thinking. In the sequel, the wife will come back as the fungus monster.
Which would be interesting, considering that in a way Quatermass has moved on. And then having to bring back in his wife who's now mutating. And it would be interesting. That could be an interesting dynamic.
It would be interesting if they brought back Nigel Neal's ending for that story.
Which was?
Because in the Hammer movie, they just blow it up.
Yeah.
And in the original version, he appealed to the humanity inside Victor Caroon and got him to fight back against it.
Yeah.
And that's what killed it. Yeah, so that maybe they would do that.
Yeah, that could it's got my imagination thinking.
I bet you if we asked Warner, he'd be like, I wasn't thinking about a sequel at all.
But then again, I did point out a bit that you had not caught on to yet, because you didn't realize why the octopus was being made a big deal in the opening. But
yeah,
it seems to be that because Quatermass says you need to study the marine life to know the alien life, and both the ship and octopus change colors based on what's happening.
Yeah.
So clearly, that's what I think he was stating. If that was at a conscious, that's what he's stating earlier on as foreshadowing.
Yeah, that is possibly very true, actually. But yeah, overall, I think this is a strong. It would have been a good movie, I think.
Yeah. Just this feels like a first draft, but it's a really good first draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the better scripts I've read from him, actually. Now, granted, I've never read the script for Demonic Toys, but yeah, no, it was an enjoyable read, and it seemed to you can tell he had watched both versions.
Yeah,
and he was familiar with them to some degree, which I like.
Yeah,
and I think Alex Proyas would have directed this really well, and if anything, would be less controversial than iRobot.
Well, that movie nearly made him quit directing.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Because of Tom Rothman.
Oh, well, of course.
But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this script. The monster details I think are all good. I definitely like the expansion on the ship detail.
I like the expansion on the mob violence. Because it's always sort of like, because it's mostly off screen in both of the other versions. And in fact, one thing is off screen completely in both, and it's represented with hilarious sound effects in both versions. Where Roni goes, who in the movie is played by the guy who's in every POW movie. He goes out, looks out the window, goes, "Wow, Quatermass, they're killing the animals." Guess you're a sound effect.
Yeah. I was gonna say, damn it, I forgot.
Oh well.
Trying to think what I was gonna say. Damn it.
Oh well, we'll figure it out.
Oh, the whole aspect of because in the movie at least, I know like they're still allowing in reporters. The whole thing, well, they're still doing their research on it.
Yeah.
In the opening, but here it's like, nope, that shit. If the military got involved, it needs to be classified.
Well, they were allowing at the beginning, because they cut out the whole thing where it starts as an archaeological dig, paleontological dig, and then they find the thing, and this it kind of all gets mushed together into one.
True. But yeah, no, this is definitely one of the stronger David S. Goyer scripts that I've read.
Yeah, it would go up there. It's good. I just think it does sort of lose the message a little bit at the end because the whole idea that it's about something in human nature. And there's still all of that there, but it's the mechanics of it are muddled by the fact that the aliens are also coming back to life.
Yeah.
We already say in here, we're evil, and the aliens are going to come down and snatch us out of the sky.
Yeah, it could work. But no, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have to say about this. At first I didn't think I was going to like the characterization. I'm trying to think what else.
The characterization, it got better as it went along. It was mainly just that first scene with him where it's like, dude, chill.
Yeah, I think I was just like I think I was put off like, oh, they're trying to make him more of an action hero by his description in the opening. But it ended up working in his favor.
Yeah, it ended up working by the end. But once they got done with like the really silly aggressive stuff with him, like jamming his hand into the tank and then pointing a sword at it.
Yeah.
Oh, but no, overall I would say it was a good read. It just could use a little short up, maybe a second or third draft.
I think that can be said about anything.
Yeah, that can be. Yeah, I said that like 6 times about the last script I did.
Yeah, no, this is a pretty fun read. And it's a shame that Nigel Neal didn't like it, but apparently he was a hard guy to please from what I've heard.
Well, I've never seen his reactions to this, so.
Yeah, we don't know what his reactions are.
He might not have.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't appreciate Halloween 3, just like everybody else in the 80s, so.
Yeah. Well, apparently from my knowledge, from like what Tom Duvall said, like he had a very strong chip on his shoulder, over the industry. I think, in particular, the American industry, with Hollywood.
Yeah, that is understandable.
Yeah, like I said, especially considering like the concepts that his work is dealing with as well, that can sometimes be harder for like a studio set to grasp because they don't know what they're talking, they don't know the genre or stuff like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's always possible. But yeah, I think we got it down pretty well. It would have been a cool movie to see, actually. But yeah, I've run out of things to say, so.
Yeah, we're trying to repeat ourselves.
Yeah, with that being said, till next time.
Yeah, Leonard, I have a whole list of scripts that we can look at.
Yeah, you fucking called dibs on like 12 at once.
I think I suggested some of them, and then some of them I called dibs on, but not the greatest amount.
You called a shitload of dibs. Like, no, I want to do all the Bond scripts.
I might be willing to give up the blob. We'll see.
Yo, until next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.